Black and White by Liu Jiming. Translated by Chen Gang. Part 3, Volume 2, Chapter 1, 1. Provincial Party Committee Compound. Du Wei always drove himself whenever he went to the Provincial Party Committee compound to report to Minister Lang Tao. Du Wei was a frequent visitor to the Provincial Party Committee compound. His first time entering the compound was more than a decade ago. At that time, he had just joined the Dongjiang University photography class and was unfamiliar with Dajiang City. Once he stepped onto the road, he couldn't even tell which direction was which. It all started with his acquaintance with Old Song Qiankun. When Old Song retired from his leadership position, he forgot to take some private materials home with him, materials that were very precious. Old Song was writing his memoirs, and these materials were exactly what he needed. At that time, Du Wei had just met Old Song through Song Shaofan, and because he had successfully restored a batch of old photos, he gained Old Song's deep trust. He had accompanied Old Song back to the places where he had fought and worked to collect materials, almost becoming his half-secretary. Once, Old Song asked him to go to the Provincial Party Committee compound to retrieve the materials that he had not had time to take home. At that time, the Provincial Party Committee and the provincial government were still working in the same compound. On the left side of the gate was a sign that read, Communist Party of Dongjiang Province Committee, and on the right side, there was a sign that read Dongjiang Provincial People's Government. Next to the gate stood a green sentry box, and at the entrance of the sentry box stood an armed police officer, like the sentry at the entrance of Old Song's South Lake compound, chest out, stomach in, eyes straight ahead, awe-inspiring. Before, in Chuzhou, Du Wei had entered and exited the Chuzhou Municipal Party Committee and Municipal Government compound more than once. Jiang Lily's father, his father-in-law, was then the chairman of the Chuzhou Federation of Trade Unions, and the Federation of Trade Unions worked in the Municipal Party Committee and Municipal Government compound. Therefore, entering and exiting the compound was almost like entering and exiting his own home. Of course, the Chuzhou Municipal compound couldn't compare with the Provincial Party Committee compound. At least there were no armed police on guard, and the sense of majesty and deterrence it gave people was far less. And for government departments, these two feelings were precisely indispensable. That time, Du Wei was about to enter from the main entrance like he would enter the Chuzhou Municipal Party Committee compound when the sentry sternly shouted, "Stop!" He put on a smile and explained to the sentry, "Song Lao asked me to get some materials for him." But the sentry looked at him expressionlessly and commanded, "Register over there." Then he turned his face and stopped a car about to drive into the compound. The guard room next to the gate was crowded with people who wanted to enter the Provincial Party Committee compound. Du Wei walked to the registration window and said, "Comrade, Old Song asked me—" Before he could finish speaking, a middle-aged man in a blue uniform with a pockmarked face, Ma Zhu in Chinese, interrupted him, threw out a wrinkled registration book, and said coldly, "Register!" Then he buried his head and concentrated on cutting his nails. Du Wei had no choice but to pick up the ballpoint pen on the windowsill and register each item according to the department and person in charge that Song Qiankun had asked him to find. Ma Zhu took the registration book, glanced at it, and then looked up and sized him up, asking in a tone of interrogating a prisoner, "What do you want from Section Chief Chen of the General Office?" Du Wei repeated the sentence he had been interrupted from, saying earlier, "Song Lao sent me." But Ma Zhu interrupted him again. "Who is Song Lao?" Du Wei was stunned and couldn't answer for a moment. Ma Zhu rolled his eyes at him impatiently, picked up the phone next to him, and dialed a number. The phone was quickly connected, and Ma Zhu said in a respectful tone completely different from when he spoke to Du Wei, "Section Chief Chen, there's someone here to see you. Says Song Lao sent him. Let him in? Okay." Ma Zhu hung up the phone. His impatient expression had greatly improved, but he still seemed very stiff. He waved his hand at him as if sending away a beggar. "Go in!" Only then did Du Wei enter the Provincial Party Committee compound from a small door next to the guard room, as if he had been granted amnesty. These were all experiences from more than a decade ago. But over the years, every time Du Wei went to the Provincial Party Committee compound to do business, he couldn't help but recall that humiliating feeling when he passed the gate. Although more than 10 years had passed, the gate, the sentry box, and the 2-room registration office next to the gate of the Provincial Party Committee compound were still the same as before, without the slightest change. The only thing that had changed was Du Wei himself. He had climbed step by step from a student in an adult photography class at Dongjiang University to a reporter at the Chuzhou reporter station of the Provincial Daily to the president of the Popular Art magazine, the chairman of the Popular Art Group, Company, Limited, the chairman of the Provincial Photographers Association, the Vitsu chairman of the Provincial Federation of Literary and Art Circles, and a member of the Provincial Political Consultative Conference, becoming a well-known and influential figure in the cultural circles of Dongjiang Province. He used to have the greatest ambition of just joining the Provincial Photographers Association and becoming a member. Now, he had long since discarded the used car he had bought when he first joined Popular Art magazine and replaced it with a 5X imported original Mercedes-Benz worth more than 1 million yuan. The license plate was also a government vehicle license plate issued by the Provincial Public Security Department, starting with the number 0 in white and red. With this license plate, he could enter and exit the Provincial Party Committee compound without registering and drive straight in. The first time Du Wei drove his Mercedes into the Provincial Party Committee compound, he saw the armed police salute him with a standard military salute. Just like the first time he heard people call him Chairman Du and President Du, he felt especially pleased, especially when he saw those people waiting in line to register in the registration office. A strong sense of superiority welled up in his heart. This sense of superiority brought about by status and position was more intoxicating than that brought about by money, although these two were often closely linked. Compared with the rapid changes in the provincial capital in recent years, the changes in the Provincial Party Committee compound seemed slow and lagging behind. If you didn't look carefully, you could hardly see any changes. Sure enough, the Rhodia japonica plants on the side of the road and the trees behind them were still so short, and the square office buildings in the compound looked gray and drab, like matchboxes. Most of the buildings in this style were built in the 1950s, 1960s, and 1970s, and they had almost disappeared from the streets and alleys of the provincial capital in recent years. Only in the Provincial Party Committee compounds were preserved in good condition as cultural relics. This gave Du Wei the feeling of returning from the present to the past every time he entered the compound, as if riding a time machine. Only when he saw one or several armed police soldiers standing erect in front of the door of a certain building did he realize that this compound was the central hub of the entire province, and that the people working in that inconspicuous building with sentries on guard were the provincial party secretary and the governor. 2 years ago, after the provincial government moved from here to the new office building in the South Lake New Aruha, this compound became the exclusive office area of the Provincial Party Committee. Du Wei felt that although the provincial government's new office building was tall, majestic, and magnificent, it lacked a sense of awe-inspiring mystery compared to the inconspicuous houses in the Provincial Party Committee compound hidden among the trees. He remembered what he had read in a book in the photography class at Dongjiang University. True power is often manifested in a deep, hidden sense of mystery. Suddenly, he had a moment of tremendous enlightenment. In the Provincial Party Committee compound, Du Wei was most familiar with the Provincial Party Committee propaganda department. He thought it was the most inconspicuous and even the most dilapidated building in the Provincial Party Committee compound. 2 of the 5 floors in total were occupied by the Provincial Party Committee General Affairs Administration, saying it was a loan, but it had never been returned. Every time Du Wei went to the propaganda department, he felt sorry that the office conditions of the section chiefs, to whom he had to nod and bow and show great courtesy, were worse than his own, especially since the office of Deputy Minister Lang Tao, who was in charge of literature and art and with whom he dealt most often, was not even as big as his office. It wasn't until 2 years ago, after the provincial government had moved out and the office building had sufficient rooms, that the General Affairs Administration returned the 2 floors it had occupied. The office conditions of the propaganda department improved somewhat. Of course, for Du Wei, the real change in the Provincial Party Committee propaganda department was that Lang Tao had been promoted from deputy minister to minister. Going from deputy to full, entering the standing committee of the Provincial Party Committee meant that Lang Tao was not only the leader of the Provincial Party Committee's propaganda department, but also a provincial leader. In the Provincial Party and government power structure, the standing committee of the Provincial Party Committee member, who was also the propaganda minister, was even more important than the Vitsukh governor. After Lang Tao was promoted to the standing committee of the Provincial Party Committee and propaganda minister, he was immediately equipped with a car and a secretary and moved from a room of less than 15 square meters to the spacious office left by the former standing committee member and minister. In the past, when he came to the propaganda department to find Lang Tao, he would just make a phone call and come over, but now he had to call his secretary to make an appointment first. Despite these inconveniences, Du Wei had no complaints because, in his heart, he had always regarded himself as one of Minister Lang Tao's people, minister. Lang Tao's office was on the 5th floor, the highest level of the office building. Apart from the minister's office and the conference room, no one else worked on the 5th floor. The 4 deputy ministers of the provincial propaganda department had their offices on the 3rd and 4th floors. Unless there were meetings or work reports to the minister, few people came up to the 5th floor. This alone spoke volumes about the minister's prestigious status. Du Wei had visited the propaganda department countless times before, but his opportunities to go to the 5th floor were rare. According to the Leadership Division of Responsibilities, the Provincial Arts Federation fell under the deputy minister in charge of arts and literature. The Popular Art Muhdia Group was a secondary unit under the Arts Federation, and as its chairman, Du Wei's administrative rank was only that of a department head. He wasn't qualified to report directly to the minister unless there were special circumstances. Therefore, during his previous visits to the propaganda department, Du Wei always met with Deputy Minister Lang Tao, who was in charge of his area. He had only seen the then propaganda minister at large meetings of the provincial propaganda system. The former minister Wei had served as the municipal party secretary in Chuzhou for many years. He only received his promotion opportunity when he was nearly 60. Like a daughter-in-law finally becoming a mother-in-law after 10 years, he inevitably liked to put on airs. Though all the bureaus and offices under the propaganda department were of department-level rank, their heads still had to make appointments and wait in line to report to Minister Wei. This led to much private grumbling among these bureau chiefs and office directors, who found the minister difficult to deal with. Du Wei thought differently. He believed that even the highest official was still human, and humans have their temperaments and preferences. Like a doctor taking a patient's pulse, if you could read it correctly, what illness couldn't be cured? These were the words of his godfather Wu Bozhong, which Du Wei considered profound wisdom and kept close to his heart. Once, after finishing a work report with Lang Tao, Du Wei suddenly expressed his wish to meet Minister Wei, asking Deputy Minister Lang to arrange an introduction. Although Lang Tao was quite familiar with Du Wei by then, being a leader with an academic background, he took everything seriously. He probably felt this request didn't quite follow protocol. He asked, "What business do you have with Minister Wei?" Du Wei hesitated before replying, "Minister Wei worked with my father-in-law in Chuzhou, and my father-in-law asked me to pass along a message." This was actually a lie Du Wei made up on the spot. His father-in-law had never mentioned Minister Wei, and given his father-in-law's rank, he couldn't really have been considered Minister Wei's colleague. Fortunately, Lang Tao didn't probe further. After a moment's consideration, he surprisingly agreed and immediately called Minister Wei. "You're in luck. The minister is in his office and has agreed to see you," Lang Tao said after hanging up. That was Du Wei's first time going to the 5th floor and his first solo meeting with a leader at the Provincial Party Standing Committee level, not counting the retired elder Song Qiangkun. Of course, when Du Wei reached the 5th floor and was led into Minister Wei's office by the secretary, he felt nervous. His calves trembled slightly, and his speech became somewhat stammered. Outwardly, Minister Wei appeared quite genial, wearing a faded gray Sun Yat-sen suit, a style rarely seen now that most officials wear Western suits. His hair was almost completely white, making him look like a retired worker at first glance. Minister Wei had his secretary pour Du Wei a cup of tea. Upon hearing he was from Chuzhou, the minister enthusiastically began discussing the old city walls there. "When I worked in Chuzhou, I would practice Tai Chi by the walls every weekend." Du Wei mentioned that before attending the Dongjiang University photography program, he had run a small photography business outside the South Gate and tentatively mentioned his father-in-law. Minister Wei made a non-committal sound. "Oh, what's your father-in-law's name?" Du Wei casually mentioned his father-in-law's name, adding, "He worked at the Municipal Federation of Trade Unions." Noticing that Minister Wei showed no recognition, he quickly changed the subject to Song Qiankun. Elder Song had been a provincial leader in Dongjiang for many years and had promoted many officials. Given Minister Wei's age, his time would have overlapped with Song's leadership period. "Song Qiankun." Minister Wei's expression immediately darkened at the mention of Elder Song's name. For the next few minutes, he kept his eyes lowered to his documents, sipping tea, his attitude turning ice-cold, a complete 180-degree turn. Du Wei realized he had made a fatal error, but it was too late for regret. He could only take his leave tactfully. Du Wei later learned that Minister Wei had remained stuck in his position as Chuzhou's party secretary for 10 years because he had offended Song Qiankun, then the main provincial leader of Dongjiang, who had refused to approve his promotion. Only after Song Qiankun's retirement did Wei finally get his chance to advance. But Du Wei had known nothing of this complicated relationship. He had initially intended to impress the minister by showing he had connections, but instead had inadvertently placed himself in opposition to him. It perfectly illustrated the old saying, "Cleverness can outsmart itself." He had tried to flatter but kicked the wrong horse. He couldn't help but sigh at how deep the waters of officialdom ran. One wrong move could capsize your boat. From then on, Du Wei stopped wavering and firmly aligned himself with Lang Tao. Events proved this was the right choice. After Minister Wei stepped down to become Vitsu chairman of the Provincial People's Congress, the academic-minded Lang Tao took over as minister. As he headed to the 5th floor, Du Wei checked his watch. It was 10:30 a.m., exactly the time Lang Tao had scheduled him for. Exiting the elevator, the conference room was to the left and the minister's office to the right. Between them was a small office, the secretary's room. Each time a minister transferred, their secretary would follow, and the new minister's secretary was Xiao Li, who had graduated from Dongjiang University only 2 years ago and had been assigned to the Provincial Party Propaganda Department. Lang Tao, with his overseas doctorate, had chosen Xiao Li as his secretary, clearly influenced by their shared alma mater. More coincidentally, Xiao Li was also from Chuzhou, adding a hometown connection to their university ties. This was perfectly natural and unobjectionable. After all, what leader wouldn't want a secretary they could trust? Du Wei had established a hometown connection with Xiao Li back when the latter was still just an ordinary staff member in the arts division. Given Du Wei's already established trust with Lang Tao, he didn't need to curry favor with the minister through a secretary. Still, experience had taught him that having familiar connections was essential for getting anything done. Personal relationships were a master key, including school ties, alumni connections, and hometown bonds. Mastering and utilizing these relationships was a big step toward success. This was another piece of wisdom from his godfather, Wu Bozhong. Take today, for instance. When Du Wei initially tried calling Lang Tao directly as usual, both his mobile and office phones went unanswered. He eventually had to call Secretary Xiao Li, only to learn that Lang Tao was in a provincial party standing committee meeting. Only such important meetings would keep Lang Tao from answering his phone. Chairman Du, the standing committee meeting ends at 10. I'll mention it to the minister. Why don't you come to his office at 10:30? Xiao Li had said. Would such a prompt meeting arrangement have been possible without their shared hometown connection? Du Wei wondered as he stepped out of the elevator. When Xiao Li emerged from his office and hurried over, Du Wei pulled out a small gift he had prepared from his brown suede briefcase and pressed it into Xiao Li's hands. It was a blood ruby he'd bought recently in Yunnan's Dali, worth several thousand yuan. Xiao Li's face reddened slightly, and he made a hesitant attempt to return the gift box, but Du Wei firmly pressed it back, giving him a meaningful look. Xiao Li's hand, as delicate as a girl's, quietly withdrew with the gift. The minister just returned to his office. He was about to call the deputy ministers to relay the provincial party standing committee meeting's spirit, but when he heard you were coming, he postponed it to the afternoon. Xiao Li lowered his voice with a conspiratorial wink, speaking in the intimate tone of a fellow townsman. Old Du, you really have some pull. Du Wei felt quite pleased hearing these words, though he didn't show it on his face. Instead, he modestly waved his hand. Not at all. It's Secretary Xiao who has the influence. With that, he turned toward the minister's office on the left. Although the minister's office door was open, Du Wei still knocked. He would have walked right in the past, but since Lang Tao had moved up to the minister's office on the 5th floor, he had changed this habit. You can't be as casual with Minister Lang as before, his godfather Wu Bozhong had warned. Sometimes, Du Wei felt his godfather truly had a supernatural vision, seeing everything. However, even without his godfather's reminder, he understood these rules of officialdom. Otherwise, he wouldn't be Du Wei. Minister, Chairman Du is here, Xiao Li announced. Come in, came the familiar voice from inside. As Du Wei quickly stepped into the office, Xiao Li retreated to his own room. The office was about the same size as Du Wei's own, and looking at its furnishings and layout, it was actually less impressive than his. The desk, in particular, appeared to be ordinary wood furniture, much smaller than Du Wei's red rosewood executive desk, specially purchased from Xishuangbana in Yunnan. However, the row of bookshelves behind the desk did command some presence, though it wasn't so much the shelves themselves as the thick volumes filling them that impressed. Unlike the reference books displayed for show in most leaders' offices, Lang Tao's shelves held books not only in Chinese but also in English and German. Beyond the requisite policy books for officials, most were academic works, immediately revealing the office owner's scholarly background, distinct from ordinary bureaucrats. Du Wei shifted his gaze to the 2 rows of sofas opposite the desk, which effectively transformed the office into a small conference room. With the linen carpet on the floor, Du Wei immediately felt the appropriate gravitas of a provincial party standing committee member and the propaganda minister's office. Lang Tao was reading documents at his desk when Du Wei entered. He did not look up, merely pointed to the sofa in front of his desk and muttered, You're back? Du Wei momentarily didn't understand the "you're back" reference. Then he recalled his recent trip to Beijing, though that was over a month ago, and he had already reported the relevant details to Lang Tao upon his return. The minister must be too busy and thought he had just returned from Beijing, Du Wei thought. Far from being bothered, he was actually pleased. The minister's casual manner meant no formalities were needed, showing he still considered Du Wei one of his own people. Realizing this, Du Wei's initial nervousness subsided. Though Lang Tao was still reading documents at his desk, Du Wei wasn't anxious. He quietly sat on the sofa, casually looking around this office he'd visited numerous times before. Regarding decor, it hadn't changed much from the previous Minister Wei's time. Only the books on the shelves had been replaced. Minister Wei's decorative books had been swapped for academic volumes in multiple languages, reflecting the current occupant's scholarly background. 3. Tacit Understanding. Du Wei came today primarily to report to Lang Tao on the latest developments in the popular art media group's IPO. According to the Propaganda Department's Leadership Division, after Lang Tao's promotion to minister, the popular art media group's IPO oversight should have transferred to his replacement deputy minister. However, Lang Tao had personally managed this matter from the beginning, so procedurally, Du Wei's reporting to him wasn't inappropriate. Moreover, today's report wasn't about routine matters. The popular art media group's IPO application, which had been suspended for 2 or 3 years, had finally been approved by the China Securities Regulatory Commission, CSRC. When Ba Dong called with this news last night, Du Wei had wanted to inform Lang Tao immediately. Still, seeing it was almost midnight, he waited until this morning to report in person at the Provincial Party Committee compound. Within 6 months at most, Popular Art Media Group's shares will be listed on Shenzhen's Small and Medium Enterprise SME board. Du Wei skipped the specific details of the regulatory approval, instead emphasizing the crucial roles played by Ba Dong and Hong Tai-hung. According to Ba Dong, without old Hong's connections, our application might have stalled again like last time. Lang Tao seemed uncomfortable with the term old Hong, drawing out his response. What kind of connections does old Hong have? Ba Dong mentioned that the newly appointed vice chairman of the CSRC responsible for reviewing IPO applications was an old subordinate of General Hong, that is, Hong Tai-hung's father. I see, Lang Tao softly acknowledged. So, you're saying that the application still might not have passed without this connection? That's right. Though with old Hong's connections in Beijing, even without this particular relationship, he could have found other channels. Du Wei understood the meaning behind Lang Tao's previous comment. Over these years, Lang Tao had invested considerable effort in the Popular Art Media Group's IPO project, monitoring every step of progress and personally accompanying him to Beijing to seek Hong Tai-hung's help after their first failed application. He and Lang Tao, accompanied by Ba Dong, had spent several hours driving to Miyun to visit Hong Tai-hung. Hong Tai-hung rarely stayed in Beijing, spending most of the year at his mansion by the Miyun Reservoir, where he was difficult to meet. If it weren't for Yan Bei and Song Xiaofan putting in a word, you might not have been able to see him this time either, Ba Dong had said. Du Wei believed Ba Dong was telling the truth. Song Xiaofan and Hong Yan Bei, one Hong Tai-hung's cousin, the other his sister, and Ba Dong being Hong Tai-hung's brother-in-law, their words carried weight. Of course, the special invitation for Ba Dong and Hong Yanbei to visit Phoenix Island and stay at the artist's village played a significant role. At that time, in Miyun, Du Wei and Lang Tao's welcome gift to Hong Tai-hung was the property deed of a Phoenix Island artist's village villa. For this villa project, Lang Tao used his connections as deputy district chief in Niangzhou district, from land acquisition procedures to converting agricultural land to commercial use, from small property rights to full property rights, from art studios to private residences. Everything had gone smoothly. From project approval to construction, it had taken less than a year, whereas following normal procedures would have been challenging to approve at all, let alone taking 2 or 3 years minimum. All this was to secure Hong Tai-hung's and his Hurricane Investments support for Popular Art Media Group's IPO project. Yet Hong Tai-hung seemed unimpressed by their welcome gift, barely glancing at the property deed before setting it aside. On the drive back to Beijing, Ba Dong finally told them and Lang Tao that Hong Tai-hung had agreed to further smooth the way, but had set 3 conditions. First, to increase Hurricane Investments' shareholding percentage in Popular Art Media Group. Second, he submitted a list of names to receive original shares. And third, to arrange for American Duku Company to have priority participation in the Dongjiang Steel Group's merger and acquisition project. Back at their Beijing hotel, Du Wei and Lang Tao examined the list of original share recipients Ba Dong had given them. Though they didn't recognize any of the names, they noticed one common feature: all were women. Du Wei found this strange and privately questioned Ba Dong, who was initially evasive. After repeated questioning, he revealed some information. They're all wives of central ministry level or higher leaders. Old Hong's influence in Beijing relies on these connections. This explanation clarified everything to Du Wei, but he didn't share this information with Lang Tao for some reason. Coming from an academic background, Lang Tao, though bold in implementing cultural market reforms, was generally cautious and meticulous in his work. Du Wei worried that knowing this might frighten him off, as it clearly violated national regulations on joint stock company management. But in reality, Lang Tao was already hesitant, especially about the condition regarding American Duku Company's priority in the Dongjiang Steel Group merger. This far exceeded his authority. Popular Art Muhdia Group was set to be Dongjiang Province's first cultural industry enterprise to go public, drawing significant attention from both the Provincial Party Committee and the government. Minister Wei had personally headed the IPO project leadership group. Still, coming from a municipal position, he held conservative views and wasn't enthusiastic about the listing, constantly seeking to halt the project. It would have been terminated long ago without Lang Tao's persistent support. Now, with Hong Tai-hong's 3 harsh conditions, wouldn't this give Minister Wei more reason to terminate the project? The two men discussed it half the night without reaching a decision. Fortunately, Minister Wei retired to the second line shortly after, and Lang Tao took over as minister, bringing an unexpected turning point for the popular Art Muhdia listing project. Let's hope there are no complications. Lang Tao's face showed a trace of an enigmatic smile. Du Wei understood that Lang Tao's complications referred to the recent unrest at Donggang Group, which had temporarily suspended the ongoing merger negotiations with Duku Company. Duku Company's priority participation in Dongjiang Steel's merger was one of Hong Tai-hong and Hurricane Investment's conditions for investing in Popular Art Muhdia Group and helping with its listing. Both Du Wei and Lang Tao had worried that this incident might undo all their work, but now it seemed the impact wasn't too severe. It appears Hong Tai-hong is a man of his word. Du Wei followed Lang Tao's lead, though his tone lacked conviction. His concern was that if the Duku Company and Dongjiang Steel merger couldn't resume soon, Old Hong might turn around and accuse them of breaking their promise, affecting Popular Art Muhdia's subsequent listing matters. After the listing, Hurricane Investment would be the second-largest shareholder, and both he and Lang Tao had witnessed Old Hong's far-reaching influence in Beijing. A strained relationship would definitely not be good. Recently, Du Wei had been working hard to restart the Duku Company and Dongjiang Steel merger, including having Ba Dong ask Hong Tai-hong to use his Beijing connections and asking Song Chiang-kun to speak with provincial leaders. The current governor had been Song's secretary. But there had been no significant progress. Du Wei was careful not to make his point too strongly, avoiding any appearance of pressuring Lang Tao. After all, Lang Tao was now a high-ranking provincial leader. One couldn't speak as casually as before. Du Wei's words seemed to remind Lang Tao of something. He frowned and said, "This morning's Provincial Party Standing Committee also discussed the Dongjiang Steel situation. The Central Committee is taking the unrest very seriously and has explicitly requested that the merger project be suspended until the new party secretary takes office." The position had remained vacant since the old party secretary's retirement, with Governor Luo managing the Provincial Party Committee's daily affairs. For a while, rumors circulated among provincial officials that Governor Luo might become party secretary, and then there was talk that the Central Committee would send someone from another region. Opinions varied widely. Dongjiang was a major central province, and the Central Committee was cautious about choosing a suitable party secretary. Du Wei's eyes lit up at Lang Tao's words, and he asked, "Minister, has the new secretary been decided? Who is it?" Perhaps deliberately playing coy, or possibly due to confidentiality, Lang Tao didn't answer, instead musing, "Regardless, Popular Art Muhdia's listing is now certain." Seeing Lang Tao's relieved expression, Du Wei couldn't help feeling moved. Lang Tao devoted all his energy to cultural industry reform over the past few years, with the popular art media group as his pilot project. Its success would determine the province's cultural industry development and Lang Tao's career advancement. Over these years, Du Wei made countless trips to Beijing for the listing, so much so that even Zhang Lili joked he was like a Beijing liaison officer. With success just one step away, Du Wei completely understood Lang Tao's feelings. He felt that both Lang Tao and he deserved to relax a bit. "Oh, right, Minister. The other villa property certificates have been processed. Only yours remains." Du Wei suddenly remembered something. He took out a stack of property registration forms from his briefcase and placed them before Lang Tao with both hands, pointing to the property owner name column. When building the Artists' Village villas, besides allocating units to publicly recruited artists like Song Xiaofan and the couple Ba Dong and Hong Yanbei, Du Wei had reserved units for himself, Lang Tao, and several other provincial leaders. At market price, each villa was worth at least 3 million yuan, but they only needed to pay just over 100,000 yuan for full ownership. Du Wei didn't want only the artists to enjoy such benefits. After all the effort he and Lang Tao had put into establishing the Artists' Village project on Phoenix Island, getting a villa didn't seem excessive. Initially, when Du Wei proposed this idea, Lang Tao was hesitant and worried about violating policies. "What policies are we violating? We're paying for it, not getting it for free," Du Wei had argued. Seeing his confident reasoning, Lang Tao had relented, though when processing the property certificate, he had asked Du Wei to put his wife, He Li, as the owner. But within 2 days, probably concerned about the connection being too close to himself, he had Du Wei change it to his father, Long Yongliang's name. Then, shortly after his promotion to minister, he suddenly called Du Wei, asking him to hold off on the property registration, saying, "I need to think about it some more." Du Wei found his cautious approach somewhat amusing, thinking that in a market economy, nothing comes without cost. For a provincial leader like Lang Tao, getting a discounted villa was hardly significant. Clearly, after all these years in officialdom, Lang Tao hadn't shed his scholarly nature. However, this actually made Du Wei feel a measure of respect for Lang Tao. The result of Lang Tao's consideration at that time was the addition of 2 more provincial leaders to the list of villa recipients. Lang Tao's gaze lingered on the property owner column for nearly a minute. Du Wei had filled in all other sections of the property certificate, leaving only this one blank. Du Wei understood Lang Tao's concerns and hesitation but couldn't address them directly, only quietly reminding him the property registration deadline is only a week away. Perhaps prompted by these words, Lang Tao seemed to make up his mind. He picked up a ballpoint pen and firmly wrote down a name in the property owner column. Du Wei was startled when he saw the name. It took considerable effort to maintain his composure, acting as if nothing was unusual as he closed the registration form and placed it in his ever-present suede briefcase. "Minister, I had someone take photos of the villa's interior and gardens. Have a look," Du Wei said, pulling out a stack of photographs and placing them on the desk. As Lang Tao casually flipped through the photos, he asked offhandedly, "Does the resort's performing troupe have any new programs lately?" Lang Tao rarely had time for leisure activities beyond work, especially since becoming a provincial party standing committee member and propaganda minister. He was constantly busy, often working late in his office, forcing his secretary Xiao Li to stay late too. Once, running into Du Wei, Xiao Li had even complained about it. Lang Tao's only hobbies were watching performances and dancing outside of work. His tango and waltz were quite authentic, befitting someone who had studied abroad as a doctoral student. After learning of Lang Tao's interest, Du Wei had specially formed a performing troupe at the Phoenix Island Resort Hotel, even poaching Meng Fei, Zhang Tianyi's wife, from the Provincial Song and Dance Troupe to serve as director. Whenever Du Wei accompanied Lang Tao to Niangzhu Lake and Phoenix Island, he would arrange private performances and dance parties. For a while, Lang Tao visited Phoenix Island almost monthly, claiming it was for work, but really it was to watch the resort hotel's performances. Sometimes Du Wei would have the hotel manager arrange separate rooms for Lang Tao and himself, staying overnight after performances to return to the provincial capital the next day. Gradually, other provincial leaders also began treating Phoenix Island getaways as a fashionable leisure activity, forcing Du Wei to reserve an entire floor at the resort hotel for leaders' use. Since the incident involving his godfather Wu Bozhong being slandered and Meng Fei's subsequent departure from the troupe, Lang Tao and other provincial leaders had stopped visiting the resort hotel for performances and dancing. Seeing Lang Tao suddenly inquire about it, Du Wei was surprised. He hesitated momentarily, trying to read Lang Tao's intentions, while Lang Tao seemingly deliberately lowered his head to look at documents, showing only his well-groomed, meticulously combed hair. Du Wei recalled the name Lang Tao had just written in the property owner column and seemed to understand something. "Oh yes, I almost forgot. We recently got a new performer at the resort, formerly from the Dongjiang Steel Arts Troupe. She's excellent at both singing and dancing, every bit as good as Meng Fei," he said suggestively. "Minister, would you like to relax there this weekend?" Lang Tao made a soft sound of acknowledgement, neither accepting nor declining. But Du Wei knew exactly what to do next. 4. Big gift. Friday morning, Du Wei checked with Xiao Li and learned that Lang Tao had no other activities, so he decided to accompany the minister to Phoenix Island for some relaxation. In the afternoon, Du Wei had someone collect the property deed for the Phoenix Island villa from the Housing Bureau, seal it in a large envelope, and hand it to Lang Tao's secretary, Xiao Li. Knowing Lang Tao wouldn't bring Xiao Li to Phoenix Island the next day, he specifically instructed him to deliver the property deed to the minister that same day. Du Wei reflected that this was Lang Tao's first visit to Phoenix Island since becoming a standing committee member and minister. Although it was a private trip with a minimal entourage, not even bringing his secretary, they couldn't be as casual as when he was deputy minister. Therefore, Du Wei didn't follow his usual practice of notifying the Niangzhu Lake District leaders, only calling He San and his godfather Wu Bozhong. He San was now the general manager of the resort hotel and director of both Phoenix Island and the Village Management Committee, holding 3 positions at once. He replaced his cousin Ni Changhai as the new master of Phoenix Island. He San owed his current position to Du Wei's strong recommendation. Over 6 months ago, Nie Changhai had drowned in the pond in front of his house while drunk. There were various rumors about Nie's strange death. Some said it happened after he discovered his only son wasn't his own flesh and blood, but rather the child of his wife, Xiaoman and Master Wu. After that discovery, he often got drunk and beat Xiaoman at home, no longer letting her work at the Wugong Shrine, and fell out with Master Wu. Several times when drunk, Nie Changhai had caused trouble at the Wugong Shrine, only to be beaten away by his cousin He San and the security guards. After Nie Changhai's death, the Niangzhu district government planned to appoint someone else as director of the Phoenix Island Management Committee. But Du Wei felt He San had always been loyal to his godfather, even leading the militia to intercept petitioners when some islanders tried to file complaints in the provincial capital years ago. Didn't such a meritorious person deserve a promotion? So, Du Wei approached Deputy District Chief Bao, who oversaw Phoenix Island tourism, and spoke highly of He San. Since Deputy Chief Bao was formerly the principal of Niangzhu Normal School and vice chairman of the Yuan-Ji Cultural Research Association, combined with Du Wei's status and background, he agreed to make He San the director of the Phoenix Island Management Committee. Then Du Wei suggested appointing He San as the resort hotel's general manager. As the Popular Art Media Group was the hotel's largest shareholder, Du Wei had full authority over the hotel personnel management. Shortly after becoming the new master of Phoenix Island, He San married Nie Changhai's widow, his cousin's wife, Xiaoman. Many islanders privately cursed He San for being so heartless, but Du Wei knew that He San was actually cleaning up loose ends for his godfather. This was the real reason Du Wei had promoted him. Only he, his godfather, and He San himself understood this. On the phone, Du Wei only told Hae-san that Minister Lang was coming and to have that person from the new art troupe prepare a performance, saying nothing more. When calling his godfather Wu Bojong, Du Wei spoke at greater length. Over 6 months ago, his mother had passed away, and his godfather had personally gone to Chuju to oversee the funeral arrangements, even reading a eulogy he had written himself. The eulogy was written in classical Chinese, meticulously detailing Miss John's family background and life story with elegant phrasing and deep emotion. After finishing the reading, his godfather broke down in tears before everyone. Witnessing this, Du Wei felt a complex mix of emotions. 2 days before his mother's death, Du Wei had rushed back to Chuzhou from Dajiang. By then, his mother was in her final moments but still lucid. Holding Du Wei's hand, she said, "Wei-er, Mother is going now to see your maternal grandparents." Just as Du Wei was wondering why his mother hadn't said, "Going to see your father," she continued haltingly, "There's something I've kept buried in my heart for decades, never telling you. Now that I'm leaving, I can't take it to my grave." She paused, as if gathering great courage, then said, "Wei-er, do you know who Dr. Wu really is to you?" Du Wei felt strange hearing his mother refer to him as Dr. Wu rather than your godfather. Thinking his mother was confused, he responded, "Dr. Wu isn't my godfather?" "No, Dr. Wu isn't your godfather," his mother said weakly, opening her eyes to look at him. "He is your real father. You are his biological son." Du Wei couldn't believe his ears. Just as he was about to question further, his mother's head tilted to one side after speaking those words, and she passed away. After returning from Chuju, Du Wei avoided contact with Wu Bojong for a long time and didn't visit Phoenix Island. He didn't know how to face this suddenly revealed real father, feeling an unspeakable shame. When Wang Sheng's allegations had circulated online about his and Wu Bojong's father-son relationship, he had been skeptical. Now, recalling his mother's final words, he realized there truly was a blood relationship between him and his godfather. After not seeing him for some time, Du Wei noticed Wu Bojong had aged several years. Following the public allegations, Wu Bojong rarely appeared in public. Du Wei had initially thought of using Lang Tao's visit to the island as an opportunity for him to make an appearance. Still, as soon as he suggested it, Wu Bojong said, "Now that Deputy Minister Lang has been promoted to minister, this is his first visit to our humble island. By protocol, this old man should personally accompany him, but given my failing energy lately, I'd better let Shu Ku represent me in accompanying Minister Lang." Wu Bojong's words seemed laden with meaning. Du Wei thought about how his godfather had never before admitted to being old, but now repeatedly referred to himself as this old man. Clearly, the lawsuit had taken its toll. However, Du Wei was surprised by his godfather's initiative to send Shu Ku to accompany Lang Tao. He wondered how to transfer Shu Ku from his godfather's side. Now, the problem had solved itself. Usually, his godfather kept Shu Ku under close watch, not even trusting Du Wei to invite her for a meal at the resort hotel. Now that he was actively suggesting Shu Ku accompany Lang Tao, Du Wei couldn't quite figure it out. He recalled the name Lang Tao had written in the villa property ownership column and felt a surge of bitterness. Back at Dongjiang University, Shu Ku, Li Hong, had been like a shining star, surrounded by male students. Even Lang Tao had fallen at her feet. As a photography program student, Du Wei was considered to have a lower status than regular undergraduates. Moreover, Li Hong was beautiful and came from a cadre family. Du Wei felt there was an unbridgeable gap between them, like the Milky Way. For a while, he tried various ways to please Li Hong, treating her to meals and taking her photos, but only to get his photography work published in Lang Taosha. He never dared harbor any typical thoughts young men had about women. Later, he quietly fell for Gu Zheng, but whenever he visited the women's dormitory to see Gu Zheng, he talked more with Li Hong than with Gu Zheng herself. It was as if he wasn't really pursuing Gu Zheng at all, but Li Hong, or perhaps he only pursued Gu Zheng because he didn't dare have improper thoughts about Li Hong, making Gu Zheng a substitute. Of course, this wasn't true. Du Wei did like Gu Zheng, but this didn't exclude his almost humble adoration of Li Hong. When he was still a youth, his godfather Wu Bozhong had taught him that for a man to conquer the world, he must first learn to conquer women. Even if he couldn't conquer them, he must have had a desire for them, while also knowing how to control that desire, never letting it disrupt his plan. For men, the plan meant a career, or more specifically, power, fame, and wealth. Du Wei had followed his godfather's careful teachings step by step on his life's path. Over these years, he had known many women, but never once let them disrupt his plan. You're like that farmer Du Fu, with that same relentless determination to never let go once you've set your mind on something. Wu Bozhong said this when Du Wei had just become chairman of popular art media group. Du Wei felt that this drive within him was gradually diminishing, especially when he saw Shu Ku, his once unattainable dream girl, constantly by his godfather's side, and he couldn't even speak to her without avoiding his godfather's presence. A sour feeling would quietly rise in his heart. When he thought of Zhang Lili, whom he had to see day and night at home, he felt resentful. Why should beautiful women surround his godfather while he, in his prime, had to be stuck with a wife who looked like a pig's head? Was this damned plan really more important than having a woman like Shu Ku? All these years, his godfather had lived like an emperor at Wugong Shrine, enjoying wine and women, even fathering an illegitimate child at his age. At the same time, he had to struggle for some intangible plan. Du Wei felt extremely wronged. When the news about Wu Bozhong and Meng Fei broke online, Du Wei's first reaction wasn't anger but schadenfreude. This was somewhat unfilial, but he was indeed jealous of his godfather. Of course, he still went all out to help his godfather through the crisis. He did this not just for his godfather, but also for himself. He knew well that the entanglement between his godfather and Zhang Tianyi wasn't just about women and money. It involved many aspects. If people kept digging, it might implicate him and the entire popular art media group. With your drive, you'll surely rise higher. In the past, such words from his godfather would have elated Du Wei, but now he remained unmoved. Having reached middle age, such vain things no longer swayed him much. Having climbed from a street photographer outside Chuzhou's South Gate to his current position, Du Wei was already quite content. "Godfather, I can't wait until I'm 70 or 80 like you to enjoy life, can I?" he said. At that moment, his godfather was lying in the luxurious presidential suite at Wugong Shrine, with two women in Tang Dynasty court lady costumes giving him a massage. His godfather was half naked, his mouth half open, eyes half closed, making indistinct sounds of pleasure. Every time Du Wei visited Wugong Shrine, Wu Bozhong would get massages in the presidential suite. Besides making elixirs and practicing qigong, he spent most of his time getting massages. All the female staff at Wugong Shrine were trained in massage, including his assistant Shu Ku. Sometimes, when Wu Bozhong wasn't satisfied with the female staff's massages, he would have Shu Ku massage him personally. When Du Wei entered the room, Shu Ku had been massaging his godfather, but upon seeing Du Wei, his godfather had sent her away. Whenever Du Wei visited Wugong Shrine, his godfather would find ways to send Shu Ku away. Hearing Du Wei's words, his godfather stared at him for about half a minute, then suddenly waved his hand. After the two female staff members left, he said, "I vowed to your mother to make the Zhan family bloodline flourish through you. I've calculated your 8 characters. Your official career won't stop at the mere position of a department-level chairman. Your maternal grandfather's Zhan family was a prestigious clan in Chuzhou. In the 35th year of Emperor Kangxi's reign, the Minister of Personnel came from the Zhan family. A Qing dynasty minister would be at least equivalent to today's provincial or ministerial level. By that calculation, you still have several ranks to climb." Wu Bozhong spoke very seriously, not at all like he was joking. Seeing Du Wei's silence, he gave a cunning smile. "I know you're upset that your godfather won't let you near Shu Ku. You're angry about that." Du Wei secretly admired his godfather's piercing insight, thinking that although he was old, his faculties hadn't diminished at all. Nothing escaped his eyes. At first, your godfather did have those intentions toward Shu Ku, but after hearing about her relationship with Lang Tao, Minister Lang, I completely extinguished that thought. Wu Bozhong fixed his eagle eyes on Du Wei and said, "You'll understand eventually that your godfather did this not for himself, but for you. What woman hasn't your godfather had? Any woman on this Phoenix Island, even if she belongs to the island master, if your godfather fancies her, she's easily obtained. Why would I particularly care about someone like Shu Ku?" Wu Bozhong's words seemed irrefutable, leaving Du Wei unable to find any flaws. But he thought his godfather was just making excuses or being mysterious, like when teaching UNG techniques and elixir making. It wasn't until his mother revealed that secret on her deathbed that Du Wei finally understood his godfather's painstaking intentions. Now, hearing Wu Bozhong say over the phone that he would let Shu Ku accompany Lang Tao, Du Wei suddenly understood. His godfather's jealous guarding of Shu Ku all these years truly hadn't been for himself. That day, when Du Wei saw Lang Tao write Li Hong, Shu Ku's original name, in the villa ownership column, he was shocked and speechless. And now he found the answer in his godfather's words. Li Hong was the grand gift his godfather had been saving for Lang Tao. Chapter 2, 1. Potential and energy. Lang Tao had always considered himself an atypical official. This atypical nature referred to his academic background. In the 1980s, it was still uncommon to see people like Lang Tao entering politics from positions as university professors and overseas PhDs. As reform and opening up deepened, the organization department's criteria for selecting cadres increasingly favored youth and specialization. Particularly, overseas credentials became a golden ticket. Whether one had academic credentials or not, high or low degrees, domestic versus foreign university education, bachelor's, master's, or doctoral degrees, these factors became crucial for career advancement. Higher education meant greater promotion possibilities, while actual workability and achievements seemed negligible or at least less important than before. Consequently, buying academic credentials became a trend in official circles. Lang Tao's entry into officialdom during this climate was well-timed. His identity as a university professor and overseas PhD holder made him immediately favored by the organization department, marking him for cultivation as a reserve cadre. Initially, the organization department had planned to assign Lang Tao to a provincial university. A provincial higher education working committee leader, who also served as deputy director of the organization department overseeing young cadres and was a former subordinate of Song Qiankun, had leaked this intention to his old superior. After retiring from leadership, Song Qiankun rarely interfered with his former subordinate's work, but this time was an exception. He immediately objected. Lang Tao already comes from academia. Sending him back to a university won't achieve the goal of training and developing cadres. For an intellectual cadre like him, what's most lacking is practical work experience. He should be sent to the grassroots level. Thus, Lang Tao was reassigned as deputy district chief in charge of culture in Niangzhou district. Lang Tao only learned this later from his father, Lang Yongliang. While deeply grateful to Elder Song, he felt somewhat uneasy about advancing his career through his father's and Song Qiankun's family friendship. Lang Tao's academic achievements were earned through his talent and effort from high school through university and studying abroad to returning to teach at Dongjiang University. Now, in officialdom, relying on his father's generation's protection for promotion, opportunities was unacceptable to Lang Tao, who had always held high ambitions. He believed that he could do the same in officialdom, just as he had achieved enviable academic success. Therefore, after being assigned to Niangzhou district, he threw himself into his work, and within a few years, he had created new developments in the district. The Phoenix Tourism Island, built under his guidance, became the province's pilot experimental zone for cultural tourism reform, and he himself was promoted to deputy director of the Provincial Party Committee's propaganda department. This time not through Song Qiankun's word, but through his own achievements. Pride and a sense of moral superiority were common afflictions among intellectuals, and Lang Tao was no exception. Even though years in officialdom had worn away much of his scholarly air, that seemingly innate pride remained deep in his heart, impossible to dispel. For instance, he rarely mentioned his family's connection to the provincial elder leader Song Qiankun, quite unlike Du Wei, who constantly had elder song on his lips, as if afraid others might not know of his connection to Song Qiankun. However, this pride made Lang Tao somewhat of a misfit among his colleagues and leaders. He didn't follow the career bureaucrat's flawless, by-the-book approach in daily interactions and handling affairs. Take his relationship with Du Wei. Given his rank, their frequent interactions were unnecessary and could invite gossip. In fact, some had already reported to superiors about him bypassing Arts Federation leadership and violating work procedures. Even worse things were said. Some were well-intentioned warnings to be careful of someone like Du Wei, but Lang Tao didn't take much notice. Since his time as deputy district chief in Niangzhou, he had maintained close ties with Du Wei. Lang Tao felt there was nothing abnormal about this relationship. Which of his supervisory projects could function without Du Wei, from Phoenix Tourism Island to Popular Art Media Group? True, the man had his flaws. Vanity, boasting, opportunism, pursuit of fame and profit, and an overwhelming streetwise nature, some habits even being hard to tolerate. But so what? Shouldn't leading cadres learn to deal with all sorts of people? Once, when visiting Song Qiankun, the elder said, "Society is a grand arena, and officialdom is a smaller one. If someone wants to survive and achieve anything, they must thoroughly understand both these arenas. Otherwise, they won't be able to take a single step." This was true during the revolutionary period, and it's true during the reform period. Lang Tao felt this must sum up Elder Song's lifetime of political experience and lessons. Moreover, Du Wei truly had the ability. Otherwise, he couldn't have transformed a debt-ridden magazine office of the Provincial Arts Federation into a media group in just a few years. His investment in Niangzhou district's tourism and cultural industries showed unusual economic insight, and he deserved credit for Phoenix Tourism Island's current success. He must be one of those reform talents, often mentioned in newspapers and on television. What was wrong there in a leading cadre maintaining close contact with such capable people? Nevertheless, Lang Tao felt he could never become a seasoned official operator, just as he could never become like Du Wei. He could only be himself. Become yourself. This was a famous definition from existentialist philosophy. Lang Tao recalled his former studies of Heidegger and suddenly felt both self-mocking and self-confident. He didn't analyze how these two contradictory feelings arose. Since entering officialdom, he had rarely pondered such metaphysical questions, but Lang Tao was never just a bookish scholar. Otherwise, he couldn't have successfully transformed from an academic to a high-ranking official. This wasn't surprising. Even Heidegger had his own brilliant but brief political career. Behind Lang Tao's scholarly demeanor lay exceptional calculation skills that most people couldn't detect. In this, he resembled his father, Lang Yongliang, who might have achieved much in his official career if he hadn't been labeled a rightist. In retrospect, as a father, his intense efforts to push his son from teaching into politics weren't merely out of necessity, but from an early recognition of his son's latent talents. Of course, opportunity also played a role, what people called circumstance and ability. With these two elements, success wasn't far away. This ability of Lang Tao's was also evident in his relationship with Du Wei. Lang Tao knew well that his relationship with Du Wei was never a one-sided dependence, just as he had never fully trusted Du Wei. As a leader, he sometimes needed to show trust in his subordinates, but this was mostly a gesture. As the ancients said, "A scholar dies for the one who truly knows him." The same applies to superior-subordinate relationships. In officialdom, a perfect superior-subordinate relationship was about mutual utilization, with no room for personal feelings. When a subordinate is willing to go through fire and water for you, it usually means they've received equivalent returns. Otherwise, their dedication won't last and might even harbor potential dangers. Therefore, Lang Tao's relationship with Du Wei over these years was difficult. On one hand, he needed to make Du Wei feel trusted and valued enough to go through fire and water, while keeping the relationship within professional bounds, not crossing into personal territory. This balance was difficult to maintain, just as the boundary between public and private was hard to define. One could easily cross the line without careful attention. It was the same with him and Du Wei. Often, their relationship seemed to transcend the superior-subordinate working relationship and become a friendship. For instance, Du Wei frequently handled personal matters for him, sometimes without Lang Tao's knowledge until after the fact. For example, when his son entered the city's foreign language school, Du Wei quietly arranged it without telling him. If his wife, He Li, hadn't mentioned it afterward, he would have remained unaware. Also, Du Wei brought expensive gifts like luxury watches and wines whenever he traveled abroad. Lang Tao found it awkward to accept but impolite to refuse, so he had to take them. At first, he thought about giving something in return, but he eventually grew accustomed to it. Being too serious about such things might be counterproductive. The old saying, "clear water breeds no fish," had some truth to it. Nevertheless, Lang Tao never fully let his guard down, especially after his promotion to Provincial Party Standing Committee member and propaganda minister. He became even more cautious in dealing with Du Wei and everyone, living up to a Central Committee leader's inauguration word, like treading on thin ice, like standing at the edge of an abyss. That time, when Du Wei asked whose name to put on the Phoenix Island Artists Village Villa property deed, Lang Tao's first reaction was that it couldn't be his own name. Although Du Wei said they were paying for it, a villa worth over 3 million yuan being acquired for just over 100,000 yuan would never pass scrutiny if investigated. So Lang Tao initially told Du Wei to write He Li's name, but after a few days, he felt this was inappropriate. He Li was his wife. Putting it in her name was no different from his own, and it seemed like a poor attempt at concealment. So he had Du Wei change the owner to his father, Lang Yongliang's name. After some time, he still felt uneasy. Both father-son and husband-wife relationships were immediate family relationships. This approach might backfire. After much consideration, Lang Tao made Li Hong the property owner. After making this decision, he felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted, and he breathed a sigh of relief. At that moment, he realized his previous defenses against Du Wei had unconsciously been breached. But Lang Tao had no other choice unless he gave up the Phoenix Island villa entirely. And if he didn't take it, what about other leaders who wanted it? More than one provincial leader had hinted at this during the Artists' Village project approval to Lang Tao. However, was it really just about wanting a villa? Lang Tao couldn't face this question, just as he had never been able to face Shu Ku or Li Hong. Lang Tao knew that sooner or later he would have to face Shu Ku or Li Hong, like an old-fashioned German gentleman, confronting both their past and present. This was a debt of history and emotion. Until he repaid it, his heart would never find peace. But for Lang Tao, repaying his debt to Li Hong would mean incurring a new debt to his wife, He Li, and his deceased father-in-law, He Shouwu. It had to be one or the other. Therefore, for many years, he had remained in a tug-of-war state of hesitation and contradiction, as if torn between two forces, his whole being split in half. And now, the Phoenix Island villa provided him an opportunity to repay this debt. 2. Debt. Since Meng Fei's departure, the Phoenix Island Resort Hotel's performing troops' shows had become barely satisfactory. Sitting in the private box, Lang Tao was nearly dozing off after watching several performances. If not for the upcoming Lotus Ferry, he might have actually fallen asleep. Lotus Ferry was the resort hotel troupe's signature piece. Though credited as Meng Fei's original creation and direction, it was actually an original work from the Provincial Song and Dance Troupe, which Meng Fei had adapted into the resort's signature performance, even broadcasting it on provincial television. A few years ago, the Provincial Song and Dance Troupe had sued the resort troupe for plagiarism, but Lang Tao had stepped in to resolve the matter. Previously, Meng Fei had always played the lead role, but the show had been suspended since her departure. Today's Lotus Fairy was performed by an unfamiliar young actress wearing a long lotus-colored dress with a face like a peach blossom and a willowy figure like a fairy descended from heaven. Her appearance and performance were every bit as good as Meng Fei's. Her name is Cheng Lei, formerly from the Dongjiang Steelworkers Art Troupe, Du Wei explained beside him. Lang Tao responded with disinterested murmurs, his eyes half closed, seemingly uninterested in both the performance and the performer. Seeing this, Du Wei leaned close to his ear and whispered, "Minister, I've already had Heisan notify Shuku. She'll be here at 7:30. He glanced at his watch. Just half an hour more. Lang Tao remained silent, his half-closed eyes opening slightly. The private box was dimly lit, making his expression indiscernible. The colorful stage lights filtering in created a dreamlike atmosphere, matching Lang Tao's current state of mind. "Are you sure she'll come?" "Definitely," Du Wei said. "I called my godfather. She can't refuse to come." Hearing Du Wei's confident tone, Lang Tao felt somewhat reassured. Besides its main performance hall that could seat 300 to 500 people, the resort hotel's entertainment venue had several private boxes specially reserved for leaders. Though each box was less than 5 square meters, they were luxuriously appointed with strong privacy features, containing not just sofas and tea tables, but also refrigerators and wine cabinets with dedicated servers. Lang Tao always watched the hotel troupe's performances from a private box, and this time was no exception. The difference was that there was no dedicated server this time, unless you counted Du Wei. In a sense, Du Wei was Lang Tao's chief attendant. He had arranged everything through Heisan, the Phoenix Island Management Committee director and resort hotel general manager. Knowing Lang Tao had studied in Germany and liked Riesling wine, Du Wei had quietly noted this and bought an entire case during a European trip 2 years ago, always keeping 2 bottles in the trunk when accompanying Lang Tao. Now, an unopened bottle of Riesling sat on the tea table. It remained unopened because today's true protagonist hadn't yet arrived. Du Wei's arrangements were almost flawless, and he hadn't needed to consult Lang Tao beforehand. In this regard, Du Wei far surpassed Lang Tao's secretary, Xiao Li. There was a high degree of tacit understanding between them. More than just understanding, many things didn't need to be spoken. Even the slightest hint was enough for Du Wei to grasp Lang Tao's meaning, from the property deed lying in his briefcase to the bottle of Riesling on the tea table. He was like a parasitic worm that had crawled into Lang Tao's belly. Lang Tao couldn't help thinking, am I becoming too dependent on Du Wei? This thought suddenly crossed his mind, accompanied by a fleeting sense of unease, but it vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Lang Tao's thoughts drifted at this moment, returning to Dongjiang University more than 10 years ago to that tiered classroom in the 4th teaching building that could hold over 500 students. He had lectured about Heidegger, his speech filled with existentialist terms like self, superego, concealment, and the forgetting of being. Having recently returned from Germany to teach at Dongjiang University, his Mandarin still carried traces of foreign intonation and English or German words. He remembered that as the lecture ended, students passed numerous question slips. The questions were wide-ranging, but one left a deep impression that he still remembered clearly. "Professor Lang, could you talk about Heidegger's glorious experience of praising fascism and abandoning his devoted student Arendt?" Lang Tao couldn't remember if he had answered that student's question. He only remembered that after the lecture ended that evening, he and a female student walked out of the classroom with the departing crowd, continuing their discussion about Heidegger. This student had a face like a full moon, was tall and model-like, spoke perfect standard Mandarin, and had a lovely voice. During the lecture, she sat in the position closest to the podium. As they talked and walked that day, they unconsciously passed through a grove of trees and arrived at the Osmanthus Garden Women's Dormitory. He was surprised, not knowing what force had led him to accompany and talk so much with a student he barely knew, walking such a distance. Only at parting did he learn that her name was Li Hong, a Chinese department student, the Langtausha Literary Club president, the editor-in-chief of Langtausha, and a former campus radio announcer. No wonder her Mandarin was so perfect. "Look, Teacher Lang, you've walked me to my dorm." The student's bright, clear laughter carried undisguised delight. In the darkness, his face reddened. "Oh, I live not far from here." He seemed to be explaining something, sounding somewhat defensive. At that time, to concentrate on translating Heidegger's biography, he wasn't living at home but in a single dormitory assigned by the school. From that day on, Lang Tao and Li Hong began dating. Although he had been involved with an Italian girl while studying in Germany, he had never found the feeling of being in love. Only after meeting Li Hong did he experience the taste of true romance. A poet once said that true love is flame and lightning, burning and fusion, the union of spirit and flesh, the sublimation of life and death, just like Heidegger and Arendt, Sartre and Beauvoir. He even felt Li Hong somewhat resembled Arendt, and how he had once envied Heidegger and Arendt's love. Although their ending was ultimately unfortunate, their love remained pure and beautiful in his heart, possessing a power and quality that transcended time and space. At first, Lang Tao and Li Hong's love was a secret, and few people knew about their relationship, including their parents. Later, when his father pressured him to get engaged to He Li, the daughter of his old friend and Dongjiang University president He Shouwu, his relationship with Li Hong became public. For the same reason, they soon broke up. This caused his relationship with his parents to become very strained, and he didn't return home for nearly half a year. He felt utterly despondent. Every time he walked through campus, his mind was filled with memories of his footprints with Li Hong in Lover's Grove and the scent of their lovemaking. It was an unbearable pain, like being unable to face one's own corpse. For this reason, when his father-in-law, President He Shouwu, mentioned that the Provincial Party Committee was looking to select young university teachers for the Third Echelon Reserve Cadre Training Program, and when old Governor Song Qian-kun asked if he was willing to leave teaching for politics, he agreed without hesitation. Only after leaving Dongjiang University did he learn that Li Hong, due to her father's corruption issues, had been rejected by several central and provincial institutions upon graduation and ultimately ended up at the Economics and Management Institute, which didn't even have formal staffing quotas. Thinking of Li Hong, who had once been like a star at Dongjiang University, falling to such a miserable state, he felt increasingly pained and uneasy, as if her fate was somehow connected to him. The sudden end of their romantic relationship was like pushing someone into a well or adding frost to snow. Lang Tao repeatedly asked himself if he had known this would happen, would he still have broken up with Li Hong and agreed to get engaged to He Li? He couldn't answer, and the more he couldn't answer, the more he felt he owed Li Hong a debt. Later, when Lang Tao inquired at that private college, he learned that Li Hong had resigned shortly after and disappeared without a trace, as if she had vanished from the city. "Minister, she's here." Lang Tao heard Du Wei whisper beside him, and he immediately stood up and left the private box. About 2 minutes later, the box door opened, and someone entered with very light footsteps, as if it weren't a person but a shadow. The box was dimly lit, making it impossible to see the newcomer's face and clothes clearly, but Lang Tao knew who it was. Even with his eyes closed, he could sense who it was. After over 10 years, he still recognized that presence that had once made his heart flutter and mind dizzy. "You've finally come," Lang Tao murmured, while an unspoken thought remained in his heart. He had waited almost 10 years for this moment. "I see you often enough, if not in newspapers, then on television." Her voice still carried that same magnetic quality and flexibility from her days as a campus radio announcer, uniquely charming, though her tone held a hint of mockery and sarcasm. "Not just in newspapers and on TV, right? We even ate together last time, but you acted as if you didn't know me, he said, sounding defensive. Li Hong, I've come to Phoenix Island often these years and visited Wugong Shrine many times. Don't call me Li Hong, Minister Lang, she said coldly. I'm Shu Ku, Master Wu's assistant and Secretary General of the Yuanji Cultural Research Association. Hearing this icy voice, Lang Tao couldn't help but shiver. He raised his eyes to see her wearing her usual black professional suit, her fair and beautiful face seemingly covered with a layer of frost, making him feel a chill coming toward him. Very well, Shu Ku, Secretary Shu, he said with a bitter smile. Thank you for gracing me with your presence today. I thought you would refuse to see me as before. Master Wu has spoken. I dare not come. So I have to thank Master Wu, he said with some jealousy, but he felt it was a bit ridiculous as soon as he finished speaking. How could I, a member of the Standing Committee of the Provincial Party Committee and Minister of Propaganda, be jealous of Wu Bozhong, who is already over 70 years old? But it was indeed the fact. Over the years, Shu Ku had been inseparable from Master Wu, and it was challenging for him to see her alone. Didn't this make him jealous? It's been more than 10 years. We can't just quarrel every time we meet, Lang Tao said in a different tone. He stood up and took the bottle of Riesling from the coffee table. Sit down, Riesling. Remember, this is the wine we drank on our first date. As he spoke, he poured wine into 2 tall glasses prepared long ago. She hesitated for a moment and finally sat down opposite. I know you have always hated me. Lang Tao looked at her with regret. I don't want to defend myself, but I want to tell you that I love you, not only in the past, but also now. Love? It's so easy for you to say this word, she suddenly sneered. After my father got into trouble, the school and those employers kicked me around like a ball. When those people who used to surround me like flies suddenly left me one by one, you abandoned me without hesitation like treating a used quilt and got engaged to your principal's daughter for the sake of your future. Did you ever think of the word you just said, minister, at that time? Faced with Li Hong's questioning, Lang Tao was speechless, like a heavy debt gambler. Yes, I owe you, he murmured. Now that you've seen me today, can you pay off your debt to me? Hearing this sarcastic tone, Lang Tao blushed slightly, as if a secret in his heart had been discovered. As if to hide something, he raised his glass and took a sip. He did not swallow it immediately, but habitually held it in his mouth. He hesitated about taking out the villa property certificate. At this moment, the property certificate seemed to have become the debt itself, weighing heavily on him, making him breathless. In a trance, he felt that the license sitting opposite him was not from reality, but from Dongjiang University more than 10 years ago. The entanglement of ice and fire, cold and heat, love and hate passed through the vast time and space, piercing his heart like a sharp arrow. At this moment, Lang Tao heard Li Hong chanting in a low voice, Dear Hannah, I am enchanted. The silent prayers of your lovely hands and bright forehead rested my heart in feminine femininity. I have never had such an experience. You looked even more beautiful and extraordinary as we made our way back through the rainstorm. I wish I could have stayed with you until dawn. This is Lang Tao's translation of a letter written by Heidegger to Hannah Arendt. It's been more than 10 years, and even he himself has forgotten it, but Li Hong can still recite it accurately. Lang Tao was bewitched like a daze in the eyes, and his body suddenly trembled like chaff. Through the confusing stage lights shining in from the cabaret, he saw Li Hong's still, beautiful face, as pale and cold as marble. 3. Building number 3. The next morning, Lang Tao received a notice to return for a Provincial Party Committee Standing Committee meeting. The call came from Zhang Qingguo, the Secretary General of the Provincial Party Committee. Lang Tao's head was still fuzzy from last night's drinking, but when the Secretary General personally called, it had to be something major. He reflexively asked, Old Zhang, can you give me a hint about the meeting's content? Jiang Qingguo, who was about his age and had recently been promoted from Deputy Secretary General to Standing Committee member and Secretary General, had a fairly casual relationship with him.
"The new secretary is taking office,"
he replied simply. Although news of the new secretary's appointment had been circulating for over 6 months, the specific candidate hadn't been confirmed. Lang Tao couldn't contain his curiosity. "Since the new secretary has already arrived, it's not a secret anymore. Can you tell me his esteemed name?" Jiang Qingguo seemed to have anticipated this question. He laughed and pronounced 3 syllables. "Chen Yiming." Not 1 syllable more, not 1 less, perfectly in keeping with his characteristically precise style. Then he hung up. Hearing the phone beep, Lang Tao didn't waste time thinking. He rolled out of the wide Simmons bed in his resort hotel room, hurriedly washed up, skipped breakfast, and called Du Wei to drive him back to the provincial capital. "What's the rush, Minister? Weren't we supposed to return this afternoon?" Du Wei was clearly still in bed, asking through a yawn. "The new secretary is taking office," Lang Tao repeated Jiang Qingguo's words. Du Wei let out an "ah" as his sleepy eyes snapped open. Minutes later, Lang Tao was in Du Wei's Mercedes, leaving Phoenix Island just as they had arrived. In the car, Du Wei tried several times to ask something, but seeing Lang Tao's furrowed brow and serious expression, he swallowed his words. Neither spoke until the Mercedes entered the Provincial Party Committee compound. In the car, Lang Tao's mind was filled with those 3 words, Chen Yiming. The new Provincial Party Secretary's name wasn't unfamiliar to him. While still teaching at Dongjiang University, Chen Yiming was already a rising star in political circles. The son of a general, he had been an educated youth in the Production and Construction Corps and a worker peasant soldier student at Peking University. He served as secretary to central leadership, and in the 1980s, he was sent down as party secretary of an impoverished county in North China. He then became mayor of a coastal city. He was known for daring to be first and tackling tough problems. Later, he was transferred as governor to the northern province where he had once been an educated youth. He had revitalized the struggling old industrial base in just a few years. People's Daily had published a special interview praising Chen Yiming for his courage and responsibility, calling him Hurricane Chen. A writer had even based a novel on him that caused quite a sensation and was adapted into a film. Lang Tao had Du Wei drive directly to Building 3. Before the car had fully stopped, Secretary Xiao Li came running out of the building to open the door. Standing committee members were required to bring their secretaries to meetings. That was the rule. So, Lang Tao had already called Xiao Li on the way, telling him to wait at Building 3. Building 3 was the only building in the Provincial Party Committee compound guarded by armed police. In addition to the Provincial Party Secretary and Deputy Secretary, it housed the General Office and Policy Research Office, truly the nerve center of provincial power. Over a decade ago, when Lang Tao was first transferred from Dongjiang University to the Provincial Party Committee, he had spent some time in the Policy Research Office. The office was on the 2nd floor, with the party secretary's office on the 3rd. He had never been to the 3rd floor despite being separated by just 1 floor. Even after working at the Provincial Party Committee for half a year, he had never met the party secretary. One evening after work, just as Lang Tao reached the stairwell, he saw an elderly man coming down from the 3rd floor. The man appeared to be around 60, slightly plump, wearing a gray uniform with all buttons fastened meticulously. His graying hair was neatly swept back, his head held slightly high, walking unhurriedly with a composed demeanor, less like descending stairs and more like entering a conference hall. Lang Tao felt the face was familiar, but couldn't place where he'd seen it. Out of respect for the elder comrade, he quickly stepped back half a step to let him pass. The elderly man gave a slight nod and continued downstairs, followed closely by a young man in a jacket who looked like a secretary or driver. It took Lang Tao a moment to realize that the elderly man was the provincial party secretary he had seen in newspapers and on television. From the outside, Building 3 looked no different from other office buildings in the compound. gray brick walls, rectangular Soviet-style doors and windows, typical architecture of the 1950s and 60s. Outside the main entrance, 2 rows of welcome pines stood with gnarled branches, evergreen year-round, their crowns shaped like pagodas, lending a solemn and dignified air to this otherwise unremarkable building. Getting out of the car, Lang Tao checked his watch. Less than 10 minutes remained until the meeting time.
Has the new secretary arrived?
He asked Secretary Xiao Li, who had come to meet him as they walked into Building 3. Not yet. Xiao Li hesitated before answering. But Governor Luo and the other standing committee members are here. Lang Tao had been worried about being late, and hearing Xiao Li's words relieved him. However, when he walked into the small conference room, his momentary relaxation gave way to anxiety. The Provincial Party Committee held its standing committee meetings in the small conference room. The party secretary's office and the small conference room were separated by a small rest area where secretaries would wait during meetings. Adjacent to the party secretary's office was another office of similar size. That belonged to Governor Luo Baochang, who also served as deputy party secretary. Though he sometimes worked there, he spent most of his time at the provincial government offices, leaving this room largely empty. After the old secretary had stepped down, since the new secretary hadn't yet arrived, Governor Luo had been acting as secretary and had moved his main office here. As soon as Lang Tao entered the small conference room, he saw Governor Luo, Vitsuch, Governor Yu, and several other standing committee members sitting around the conference table, speaking in low voices. Upon seeing him, they fell silent in unison, all eyes turning toward him as if in salute.
Comrade Lang Tao, sit over here.
Governor Luo warmly beckoned to him. After hesitating, Lang Tao walked over and took the empty seat beside Luo Baochang. Governor Luo Baochang was 58, wore gold-rimmed glasses, and had a scholarly demeanor that made him look like a cadre from an intellectual background. This wasn't particularly old for a provincial-level leader, especially considering he had been governor for 5 or 6 years. During his tenure, Dongjiang Province's economic and social development, particularly in state enterprise reform, had consistently led the nation, earning full recognition from the central government and state council leaders. By convention, after the previous party secretary's retirement, he should have naturally succeeded to the position. Vitsu Governor Yu, the executive Vitsu governor and standing committee member who had been Luo's partner for many years and worked well with him, should have naturally succeeded as governor. Recently, there had been many rumors about Governor Luo becoming party secretary, but the central government had ultimately sent in an outsider as the new secretary. Many found this unexpected and disappointing, feeling it was unfair to Governor Luo. Lang Tao felt the same way. This wasn't just because he believed Governor Luo had the experience and ability to serve as party secretary, but also because of his relationship with Luo. Governor Luo had previously served as Song Qiankun's secretary. Before Song's retirement, he had sent Luo from his position as director of the Secretariat of the Provincial Party Committee Office to serve as deputy mayor of a prefecture-level city, where he gained several years of practical experience at the grassroots level before climbing step by step to deputy governor and then governor. Among the current provincial party leadership, only Governor Luo and Lang Tao could be considered Song's direct line. Lang Tao's own rise from deputy district head of Niangzihu district to deputy head of the provincial party propaganda department, and until recently, his promotion to standing committee member and head of the propaganda department, was inseparable from Governor Luo's support. In fact, in the eyes of the cadres in the provincial party committee compound, he was seen as Governor Luo's man.
Comrade Lang Tao, looking at your bloodshot eyes, you certainly didn't sleep well last night, Governor Luo observed, examining Lang Tao with concern. You must take care of yourself. Health is the foundation of revolutionary work.
Lang Tao had meant to say he had just returned from Phoenix Island, but when he opened his mouth, what came out instead was, "Governor Luo, I apologize for being late." Although it wasn't yet meeting time, Lang Tao, as the most junior, youngest, and lowest-ranking standing committee member, felt that arriving even a minute later than the other committee members counted as being late. Thus, his apology was directed at Governor Luo and everyone present.
"You're not late. Secretary Jiming hasn't arrived yet," Governor Luo remarked casually, sweeping his gaze around the conference room. No of the other standing committee members spoke. Some were drinking tea, others smoking, while others stared at the ceiling with wooden expressions. This gave the conference room an oddly eerie atmosphere, unlike what one would expect while waiting for a new provincial party secretary to take office. What did it feel like then? Lang Tao couldn't quite place it, and asked, puzzled, "Secretary Yi, Meng hasn't arrived yet?" Governor Luo appeared not to hear, or perhaps heard but chose not to answer, his well-maintained face showing an inscrutable expression. "Yesterday afternoon, there was another illegal gathering at Donggang. When Secretary Yiming heard about it, he personally went there with Secretary General Qingguo." Vitsu Governor Yu, sitting next to Governor Luo, picked up Lang Tao's question. "I just heard about it myself. Keeping a room full of standing committee members waiting while the new secretary is nowhere to be seen. What kind of business is this?" Vitsu Governor Yu's undisguised complaint clearly resonated with the other committee members, who nodded in agreement, the previously silent conference room filled with a buzz of whispered conversations. "Vitsu Governor Yu, let's not grumble. Secretary Yiming has just taken office and is already going to the grassroots to understand the people's situation. This follows our party's fine tradition of maintaining close ties with the masses. Such a work style is worth learning from." Governor Luo's words seemed like a gentle criticism of Vitsu Governor Yu and served as a reminder to everyone. But Lang Tao detected a note of insincerity in them. Donggang was Dongjiang Province's first state-owned enterprise, having completed restructuring. It was a key project Luo had overseen after his transfer from the lower levels to Eishutsutive Vitsuh Governor. After Luo was promoted to governor, Vitsuh Governor Yu, who succeeded him, managed the merger project between Donggang and Duku Corporation. Donggang's reform and development over these years had been inseparable from the top two provincial government leaders. If not for the recent riot incident, the merger between Donggang and Duku Corporation might have already been successfully completed. Now, the new secretary had his eye on Donggang before even formally taking office. One could imagine how Governor Luo and Vitsuh Governor Yu must have felt. Vitsuh Governor Yu, who had risen from grassroots cadre positions, was relatively straightforward in temperament, his displeasure already evident in his sharp-featured face and earlier words. Compared to Vitsu Governor Yu, Governor Luo, with his background as a secretary, was far more reserved and composed. His words, like his round, fair face, were difficult to read. As Lang Tao pondered Governor Luo's words, his mind drifted to several months ago when he and Vitsu Governor Yu had received Bai Wen, Duku Corporation's China Regional Director. Following Hong Taiheng's request, he initially recommended Duku Corporation to Governor Luo and Vitsu Governor Yu, and the merger project progressed smoothly. But ever since that riot resulted in multiple casualties, Donggang had been thrust into the spotlight. The new secretary got involved right after taking office, but this wasn't a good sign. A shadow crossed Lang Tao's mind. 4. Standing Committee. As it approached noon, the standing committee members grew restless and began to grumble openly with discontent. Vitsu Governor Yu led the charge, with several members actually standing up from their seats and heading toward the door, declaring they were going to lunch. Lang Tao felt anxious too. He'd only eaten a piece of bread that morning and was already hungry. But seeing Governor Luo Baochang sitting there like a meditating monk, eyes half-closed in apparent tranquility, he felt compelled to stay put, though inwardly wondering when this would all end. While Lang Tao's mind wandered, he noticed the members who had reached the door suddenly freeze. Vitsu Governor Yu, who had been leading the exodus, spun around and hurriedly returned to his seat in 3 quick steps. Several people strode into the conference room as Lang Tao puzzled over this. The man in front appeared to be in his early 50s. He was very tall, about 1.8 meters, with a thin, dark face, high cheekbones, and sharp features. Though not large, his eyes gleamed like knife blades with remarkable intensity. Lang Tao knew this must be Chen Yiming, the new provincial party secretary, and he instinctively rose from his seat. Apparently warm from walking, Chen Yiming entered the conference room and removed his jacket, handing it to a young man who looked like a secretary. He briskly unbuttoned his shirt collar, then, accompanied by Secretary General Zhang Qingguo, began shaking hands with each standing committee member. At each member, Zhang Qingguo would introduce their position and name. When they reached Governor Luo, Chen Yiming clasped his hands warmly and shook them twice, saying cordially, "No need to introduce Governor Luo. We've met before at the Central Committee plenary sessions. We're old acquaintances." They were both alternate members of the Central Committee. However, Chen Yiming's appointment as Dongjiang Provincial Party Secretary would naturally result in his promotion from alternate to full member. Luo Baochang's smile seemed forced, the muscles in his cheeks sagging, making him appear much older than Chen Yiming, though they were close in age. Lang Tao noticed how limp Luo Baochang's hands were in Chen Yiming's grip, less a handshake than being shaken, and suddenly felt a wave of sympathy for the governor. When Zhang Qingguo introduced Lang Tao to Chen Yiming, he let out an "oh" and said, "So you're Comrade Lang Tao? Not only are you the youngest among the standing committee members, but you also have the highest education, a doctorate from abroad. You're truly 100% expert-type leadership cadre." As he spoke, he examined Lang Tao with interest. "I hear under your leadership, Dongjiang's cultural tourism industry has achieved remarkable results. Let's have a good talk about this later." After shaking hands with all the committee members, Chen Yiming walked to the head of the rectangular conference table. On the wall behind him was a prominent slogan: "Forever represent advanced productive forces, forever represent the progressive direction of advanced culture, forever represent the fundamental interests of the broadest masses." Chen Yiming sat down with his back to the slogan and, noticing an empty seat beside him, called out to Luo Baochang, "Governor Luo, come sit over here." Previously, Luo Baochang had always sat there at standing committee meetings, but with the new secretary taking office, he had moved to sit among the other members. As Chen Yiming called him over, all the committee members' eyes turned toward him, suddenly shifting the room's focus from the new party secretary to Luo Baochang. Chen Yiming called out again, but Luo Baochang still didn't move. Lang Tao sensed the atmosphere in the conference room suddenly growing tense. "It seems Comrade Baochang wants me to perform a solo act," Chen Yiming joked with a smile, but his switch to using Luo's given name revealed his inner displeasure and even embarrassment. This was apparent to Lang Tao and all the committee members. Having only recently been promoted, Lang Tao hadn't attended many standing committee meetings and felt somewhat nervous. Fortunately, Luo Baochang didn't let the awkward atmosphere persist. "Secretary Yiming, I've been sitting too long and my legs are a bit numb, but they're better now." He pounded his legs a few times as he spoke, slowly stood up and limped toward the seat beside Chen Yiming. Lang Tao privately admired Governor Luo's tactics. This move both showed the new party secretary a bit of resistance, expressing everyone's frustration at waiting all morning, while preventing the situation from becoming unmanageable. The timing and degree were perfectly calculated, showing that old ginger is spicier. Only then did the standing committee meeting truly begin. "Comrades, the standing committee meeting that was scheduled for 10 a.m. this morning has dragged on until now. It's almost 1 p.m., keeping you all waiting so long. I must sincerely apologize," Chen Yiming said, checking his watch as he stood up and bowed solemnly. But instead of sitting back down, he swept his gaze across the room and continued in perfect northern accented Mandarin. "I know everyone is hungry, and I've already asked Secretary General Qingguo to have the cafeteria prepare lunch. Before the boxed meals arrive, let me brief you on the situation. You probably all know that another gathering incident occurred this morning at Donggang. Several hundred to 1,000 workers surrounded the Donggang office building. A similar incident happened over 6 months ago, resulting in several deaths and injuries. You all know the reason better than I do.
it's because of the merger project between Donggang and American Duku Corporation. Why do the Donggang workers so strongly oppose this merger project? Even after the unrest has been quelled for so long and the relevant perpetrators and criminals have been legally sentenced, why are so many people still fixated on this project? Honestly, I was puzzled. This morning, I met with several worker representatives at the gathering site, and what a retired engineer named Gu Jirjin said helped me understand the underlying reason. He told me that after Donggang's restructuring, nearly 2/3 of the workers were laid off, with compensation of less than 300 yuan per month. Meanwhile, the retained cadres, from section chiefs and department heads to company deputy generals and general managers, receive annual salaries ranging from 300,000 to 500,000 and over 1,000,000 yuan, tens or even hundreds of times more than before restructuring. Even more inconceivable is that these salaries don't come from enterprise profits, but from the savings from laying off those workers. In other words, Donggang's continuous losses, which necessitated merging with a large foreign enterprise, weren't due to operational reasons, but rather the result of these cadres enjoying high salaries while depleting resources. I couldn't believe it was true, so I called Donggang's financial officer to verify. Regrettably, everything this engineer said was true. At this point, Chen Yiming paused, his Adam's apple bobbing as if struggling to swallow something. Then he continued, "Comrades, the Donggang situation reminds me of an economist's spitting theory. He compared state-owned assets to a bowl. When clean, everyone wants it, but if you spit in it, people find it dirty and don't want it anymore, allowing you to claim the bowl as your own rightfully. This view has been popular in economic circles in recent years. I think Donggang's restructuring is a vivid example of the spitting theory in practice. I don't know what you all think, but honestly, it sent chills down my spine. Suppose state enterprise restructuring follows Donggang's example of transferring the majority of workers' wealth into the pockets of a few cadres. In that case, as Comrade Xiaoping said, our reform has truly taken a wrong turn. Wouldn't we be violating the third principle of the three represents, representing the fundamental interests of the broadest masses?" As Chen Yimeng spoke, he turned to face the slogan on the wall behind him. His thick black eyebrows furrowed tightly, creating several prominent wrinkles between them. He opened his mouth wide to breathe as if struggling for air, his face showing an expression of pain. After a long moment, he turned back, leaning his upper body slightly forward, both hands pressing on the conference table, and continued in a softer tone. "Of course, I'm not completely negating Donggang's restructuring. State enterprise reform is a crucial step in our overall reform and an inevitable path toward a socialist market economy. However, our ultimate goal of reform is to develop and liberate productive forces, allowing everyone to share in the fruits of reform and opening up. We cannot treat the broad masses as burdens to be discarded. I expressed this view when I first went from central organs to grassroots work in the 1980s, and it hasn't changed. Because this isn't just my personal opinion, it's determined by the nature and purpose of our party. Therefore, I suggest that the Provincial Party Committee conduct a special discussion on the Donggang merger project and related issues. Until new resolutions are formed, the merger project should be temporarily suspended." Chen Yimeng's speech was like a stone thrown into still water, creating countless ripples. The conference room was filled with murmurs and discussions. Everyone present knew that Governor Luo and Vitsu Governor Yu were responsible for Donggang's restructuring and merger. The new party secretary's words effectively concentrated the conflict's focus on them. Lang Tao saw dark clouds gathering on the faces of Governor Luo and Vitsu Governor Yu, looking extremely unpleasant. He sensed a massive storm approaching and couldn't help but break into a nervous sweat. Just then, Provincial Party Committee Secretary General Zhang Qingguo suddenly pushed open the tightly closed conference room doors. No one had noticed when he'd left, and walked up to Chen Yimeng. He whispered something in his ear, then announced loudly,
Comrades, the boxed meals have arrived. Let's take a break and address our hunger first, then continue the meeting. Lang Tao felt relieved at hearing this, but his mind couldn't truly relax. He thought about the popular arts media group's planned stock market listing. According to Du Wei's report to him the other day, they had planned to hold a grand listing ceremony, inviting well-known artists from across the country and key leaders from the Provincial Party Committee and government to attend. But after hearing Chen Yimeng's speech, he suddenly felt this might be inappropriate. So, while the staff were distributing the boxed meals, he quietly slipped out of the conference room and called Du Wei from the corridor, instructing him to suspend all preparations for the ceremony temporarily. Du Wei was clearly caught off guard, repeatedly asking why over the phone. But Lang Tao hung up without a word and returned to the small conference room. Chapter 3. 1. Before taking office. Chen Yiming hadn't expected that right after taking office, he would encounter the second gathering of laid-off workers at Donggang. When Provincial Party Committee Secretary General Jiang Qingguo reported that the Public Security Department was organizing police officers to disperse the protesters, he immediately ordered them to stop the dispersal action and, despite the impending Standing Committee meeting, rushed to Donggang. In the plaza in front of Donggang's office building, Chen Yiming, in his capacity as the new Dongjiang Provincial Party Secretary, solemnly promised the gathered crowds that the Provincial Party Committee would carefully handle the merger project between Donggang and Duku Corporation. He immediately had the gathered workers select several representatives to hold an on-site joint meeting with Donggang's main leaders. At the meeting, the speech of a retired engineer named Gu Jirgen left a deep impression on him, and he recorded almost every word in his notebook. I was transferred from Xinjiang to Donggang with my wife and children in the mid-1950s. When we first arrived, the factory area was just wilderness without even buildings. My fellow workers and I lived in shacks, completely self-reliant, starting from scratch. After decades of hard struggle, we finally built Donggang into the province's largest steel enterprise. But since the restructuring, Donggang has gotten worse year by year. I'm talking about the workers, not the cadres. The cadres all got rich after restructuring, while the workers were laid off one by one, their decades of blood and sweat bought out for just a few thousand yuan. The chairman and general manager's annual salary reaches 3 million yuan, while workers' wages are less than 1/10 or even 1/100th of theirs. Back-end service staff only make 700 to 800 yuan monthly, production workers get around 1,000, and furnace workers 2,000. Even with these wages, they constantly fear being laid off. What's most incomprehensible is that when enterprise efficiency declines, the management never looks for reasons internally. They just want to sell it off, calling it a merger. But if you're going to sell, shouldn't you get a good price? They ignore major national steel companies like Panjihua Steel and insist on merging with that American company, with our equity share less than 20%, giving away controlling rights. Speaking mildly, this is a loss of state assets. Speaking strongly, it's selling out the country. Staff and workers have raised objections many times. Still, the management won't listen to a word and even retaliates, laying off several workers who took the lead in raising objections, including my son. Everyone's not making trouble. We treat Donggang as our home and can't bear to see it squandered by these wastrels. We proposed letting workers pool funds to buy back the shares, but they wouldn't agree to that either, even labeling us as opposing reform. Eventually, it led to deaths. Who should be held responsible? I don't need to say it, everyone knows in their hearts. But now the government only investigates the responsibility of the protesting workers, some arrested, some sentenced, while ignoring those who should really be held accountable. The merger project with the American company hasn't completely stopped either. Not long ago, Duku Corporation's China Regional Director came to inspect Donggang, treating the real responsible parties like heroes, giving flowers and sympathy money. With right and wrong so confused, avoiding the real causes, not just the workers, but even I, a long-retired engineer, can't swallow this. Before Engineer Gu had finished speaking, Chu Dongliang, Donggang's chairman and party secretary who sat next to Chen Yiming, whispered, "Secretary Chen, this Gu Jirjin's son was one of the ringleaders in the last riot and was sentenced to 3 years in prison. His in-law, Cheng Guojun, was Donggang's biggest rebel faction leader during the Cultural Revolution and once served as the head of Donggang's Revolutionary Committee." Chen Yiming had already heard from Provincial Party Committee Secretary General Zhang Qingguo that Chu Dongliang had been seriously injured in the last riot. Now, hearing the implied meaning in his words, he casually asked, "Did this Cheng Guojun participate in the last riot?" "There's no evidence yet proving Cheng Guojun participated in the last riot," Chu Dongliang hedged, "but we can't rule out ultra-leftist forces working behind the scenes." Chen Yiming glanced at Chu Dongliang, noting his plump face glowing red like 2 steamed prawns. He suddenly recalled what the leadership had told him back in Beijing. Before taking office in Dongjiang Province from Province B, Chen Yiming made a trip back to Beijing, first to talk with the leadership of the organization department, and second, to visit the senior leader. The organization department leadership's talk was largely procedural, fully affirming his achievements as governor of Province B and conveying the central leadership's earnest expectations for his upcoming role as Dongjiang Provincial Party Secretary. Both the content and form were highly programmed and standardized. Over the years, Chen Yiming had received such talks every time he had been transferred to a new position, with nothing novel about them. Of course, this time the level was the highest. Although the governor and the provincial party secretary were provincial-level positions, the difference between them was substantial. Anyone in officialdom understood that this not only meant he would become a true regional administrator, wielding power over an entire province, but also meant he had obtained a ticket to enter higher political spheres. Therefore, after the initial excitement of receiving the appointment notice, Chen Yiming felt trepidation, as if walking on thin ice or standing at the edge of an abyss. After finishing his talk with the organization department leadership, when he visited his old senior leader, he even felt somewhat nervous, like a student seeing an examiner before a major test. Chen Yiming visited the senior leader in a black red flag sedan arranged by the organization department. When the car reached the old locust tree at the entrance of Guluba Hutong, he told the car to stop and asked both his secretary and driver to return while he walked into the Hutong alone. This small street between Jingshan Park and Beihai was extremely familiar to Chen Yiming. During his years as the senior leader's secretary, he had frequented this place every few days. He knew not just every house number in the Hutong, but could almost count how many branches the old locust tree at the entrance had. Back then, several elm trees were growing on both sides of the Hutong. Every summer, the tree branches and leaves were so dense they blocked the wind, and no matter how hot the weather, the Hutong remained cool under the thick shade. In autumn, the ground would be covered with elm leaves like copper coins, spreading a golden carpet throughout the Hutong. But now, Chen Yiming couldn't see any trace of those elm trees. The Hutong was bare as if it had been ransacked, making him feel quite strange, as though he had come to the wrong place. But the old locust tree at the entrance told him this was indeed Guluba Hutong, where he had been countless times. Chen Yiming had loved Beijing's Hutongs since childhood. Although he was born and raised in Beijing, he had lived with his parents in a military compound near the old summer palace. That enclosed, monotonous military life vastly differed from his imagined Hutong life. He had read Lao She's novels depicting Beijing's common life. In his mind, everything from soybean milk, candied haws, fire-baked flatbread, and fried rolls to slide shows, acrobatics, sugar figure blowing, and vibrant courtyards like treasure boxes could be found in Beijing's Hutongs. That was the life he loved. When he was young, his father took him to visit an old war comrade who lived in a Hutong called Bingma Hutong, not far from Jingshan and Beihai. Though the family had only 3 or 4 people, they lived in a courtyard house larger than he had later seen at the senior leader's home. That was Chen Yiming's first real experience of a genuine Beijing Hutong and courtyard house, and he was filled with admiration. He also met Hong Tai-hung, the son of his father's old comrade, and they became good friends. Later, they went to Northern Wilderness together and forged an even deeper friendship in the Production and Construction Corps. Once, when their unit set an ambush in the freezing borderland between China and the Soviet Union to intercept cross-border enemies, Hong Tai-hung's legs lost all feeling from the cold. Chen Yiming carried him on his back to the Corps hospital dozens of miles away in temperatures below -30 degrees. The doctor said if the rescue had been delayed any longer, Hong Tai-hung would have lost both legs. From then on, they became comrades bound by life and death. Decades had flashed by. Both his father and his father's old comrade had passed away, and Hong Tai-hung no longer lived in Bingma Hutong. Thinking of those years after returning from Northern Wilderness, when he would often cycle from the old summer palace across half of Beijing to reach that courtyard house in Bingma Hutong, engaging in passionate discussions with Hong Tai-hung and their circle of friends, Chen Yiming felt a sense of unreality. Though it was just a short distance of less than 200 meters from the old locust tree at the Hutong entrance to the senior leader's courtyard house, Chen Yiming felt as if he had walked for a very long time. Number 26, Guluba Hutong. The moment he saw this house number, it felt familiar. From the outside, it looked no different from ordinary courtyard houses in Beijing's Hutongs. Gray courtyard walls, a faded vermilion gate tower, sparse weeds on the roof tiles, everything exactly as before, as if he had been there just yesterday. But in reality, Chen Yiming hadn't visited for many years. During his first few years as county chief of C County, after being transferred from the senior leader's side, Chen Yiming would visit Guluba Hutong to see the senior leader every time he returned to Beijing for family visits, always bringing 2 sets of local specialties, one for his father and one for the senior leader. At first, the senior leader didn't say anything. Still, when Chen Yiming returned to Beijing specifically for his father's first death anniversary, following traditional customs to pay respects at his father's grave in Babaoshan Cemetery, he took the opportunity to revisit the senior leader. That time, the senior leader spoke some deeply meaningful words. Yiming, now that both your parents are gone, you don't need to come back for family visits every year. And you should minimize or avoid visiting me too to prevent people from saying you're taking advantage of connections. In short, the fewer times you return to Beijing, the better. If possible, don't come back at all. The senior leader spoke with the same serious expression as when he had first assigned work to Chen Yiming as his new secretary. His words seemed somewhat unreasonable. After all, it had only been a year since his father's death. What will the local cadres and masses think if you keep running back to Beijing every few days? Chen Yiming felt the senior leader was questioning him, and he didn't know how to respond. He remembered that when he had first gone down to C County, the senior leader had said similar things during their talk. Don't let people know you were my secretary, and don't let them know about my relationship with your father. Remember that you're just an ordinary cadre, not there to build connections. Serve the people diligently and conscientiously in your post, like Zhao Yulu, keeping your feet firmly on the ground. Connecting these 2 conversations, Chen Yiming understood the senior leader's well-intentioned advice. During those years, he had returned to Beijing too frequently, each time caught up in endless social obligations, with more dinner engagements than he could handle. After that, he deliberately reduced his trips to Beijing. Even when official business made travel unavoidable, he would rush back to C County immediately after completing his work, not even telling his siblings. Over these many years, starting from C County, he had worked in several places, and his position had steadily risen. Still, he always kept the senior leader's instructions in mind. During this time, apart from occasional phone calls to express his regards, he had never again visited number 26 Luguoba Hutong. Chen Yiming pressed the doorbell, and the faded vermilion gate opened. A young man wearing a light gray casual suit appeared before him. Chen Yiming figured this must be the senior leader's secretary, so he began to introduce himself. I'm Chen. Before he could finish, the young man smiled and said, I know, your comrade Chen Yiming, the The senior leader has already informed us. Please come in." He made a welcoming gesture. Following the young man through the well-kept courtyard toward the living room, Chen Yiming felt that this courtyard house remained as tranquil as ever, showing no signs of change. Even the carved window lattices on the front building's facade were as vivid as before, as if freshly painted, exuding a strong flavor of traditional Beijing life. This was the atmosphere Chen Yiming had loved since childhood. The senior leader sat in an old rattan chair in the middle of the living room, looking as if he had been waiting for a while. Upon seeing Chen Yiming enter, he tremulously stood up. Chen Yiming quickly stepped forward to support him, saying, "Please don't get up. Sit, sit." Chen Yiming sat down on the nearby sofa, studying the senior leader intently. After several years without seeing him, the senior leader had truly aged. Not just his hair, but even his eyebrows had become much thinner than before. This was hardly surprising. The senior leader was 2 years older than his father, and his father had been gone for almost 10 years. Nevertheless, he felt that the senior leader's political acuity hadn't diminished with age. Even now, beneath those long, sparse eyebrows, those half-closed eyes still held that penetrating gaze. "Please forgive me for not visiting you these past years," he said respectfully, sitting perfectly straight with his back a full half-foot away from the chair back, just as he used to when reporting work to the senior leader. This is good. Only children who haven't grown up need to constantly talk about visiting their elders," the senior leader muttered, opening his half-closed eyes to scan Chen Yiming. You came alone. Didn't bring your secretary?" "Oh, I had him return with the driver at the Hutong entrance," Chen Yiming replied. Pondering the meaning behind these words, he saw the senior leader nod slightly and say "good" several times. These words of approval reminded Chen Yiming of an interesting story the senior leader had once told him. In the early 1950s, when the senior leader was serving as Dongjiang Provincial Party Secretary, Chairman Mao was touring the south and made a stop in Dongjiang, urgently summoning him. After receiving the notice, he rushed to Chairman Mao's special train. As soon as he entered the compartment, Chairman Mao asked him point-blank, "Did you come alone or did you bring a secretary?" The senior leader was startled, not knowing what this meant, and quickly replied, "Chairman, I came alone." He thought to himself, who would dare bring a secretary when meeting the chairman? Chairman Mao seemed to read his mind and laughed heartily, pointing to a stack of papers spread before him, saying, "These days, some of our leading cadres need secretaries for everything. Writing materials, making receipts, as if they themselves have no hands, feet, or brains. Besides eating and sleeping, I wonder what they can do for themselves. It seems they've completely forgotten my saying that, without investigation, there is no right to speak." Soon after, Chairman Mao reported on promoting investigation and research at the Central Committee plenary session, clearly warning against bureaucratic and formalistic tendencies among cadres at all levels. In Chen Yiming's memory, during his years as the senior leader's secretary, they spent almost a third of each year conducting investigations and research across the country. He seemed to understand the senior leader's purpose in telling him that story. Later, when he became the county chief of C County, he always kept Chairman Mao's words, as related by the senior leader, in mind. He not only tried to handle matters personally whenever possible, but also drafted or thoroughly revised most of his speeches himself. He had maintained this work style to this day. Now, from the senior leader's casual question, Chen Yiming sensed some deeper meaning. This was also the real reason he had specifically come to visit the senior leader in Guluba Hutong. Dongjiang province was where the senior leader had once governed. Back then, it was his father and the senior leader who had led troops to liberate Dajiang City, the provincial capital. After Dajiang's liberation, his father continued south with the troops. At the same time, the senior leader had removed his military uniform to become the first governor of the Dongjiang People's Government, later serving as provincial party secretary. The senior leader not only knew that territory well, but also had deep feelings for it. Chen Yiming hadn't expected that he would also become Dongjiang's provincial party secretary half a century later.
Whether as a former secretary or successor, he felt he should receive the senior leader's teachings in person before taking office. What Chen Yiming expected even less was that before he could speak, the senior leader would throw out an unexpected question. "Yiming, what's your view on allowing capitalists to join the party?" Perhaps because this question was too abrupt or weighty, Chen Yiming looked at the senior leader in surprise, not daring to answer hastily. Allowing capitalists to join the party was a major theoretical innovation after the "Three Represents" was written into the party constitution at the 16th Party Congress. The Central Party School had even held a special study session for provincial and ministerial-level cadres on this topic. Chen Yiming had thoroughly grasped this theoretical innovation's historical and practical significance. After completing the study session and returning to Province B, he even gave guidance lectures to provincial cadres. For instance, it wasn't difficult to answer, with the deepening of reform, capitalists have become an important force in China's socialist market economy and a backbone of advanced productive forces. Whether we can mobilize and utilize the enthusiasm of entrepreneurs and capitalists not only relates to whether our party can truly represent advanced productive forces, but also concerns the success or failure of reform. Allowing capitalists to join the party is precisely to expand and consolidate the party's governing foundation, maintain the party's vigorous vitality, and embody the party's role as the vanguard of both the Chinese people and the Chinese nation, mobilizing all forces that can be united to deepen reform. This was the standard answer from party documents and party school professors' lectures, and Chen Yiming had almost blurted it out, but he suddenly hesitated when he saw the senior leader's still sharp eyes under those graying eyebrows staring at him unblinkingly. He remembered that when he first became the senior leader's secretary, the senior leader often discussed important central policies and theories with him. The senior leader most detested people parroting others' words and reciting by rote. Whenever he saw large sections of central documents quoted in draft speeches Chen Yiming had written, he would habitually furrow his brows and tap his own forehead with a red pencil, as if asking, "Where's your brain?" Conversely, even if Chen Yiming made mistakes, the senior leader never minded as long as the views expressed came from independent thinking. Now, seeing the senior leader's serious yet expectant expression, Chen Yiming knew this wasn't a casual conversation, but seemed like a prepared, serious discussion. So, Chen Yiming swallowed the words that had come to his lips. The senior leader seemed to sense Chen Yiming's thoughts and handed him a book from the tea table before him, saying, "There are several articles in here. Take a look." Chen Yiming took it and saw it was a magazine with a white cover. He had heard of this magazine. It was reportedly run by several retired cadres and intellectuals, with the author of Who Are the Most Beloved People taking the lead. Curious, he opened to the title page, and upon seeing the striking headlines in the table of contents, he was startled. Communist Party members must draw a clear line between labor and exploitation on why private enterprise owners cannot join the party. Are private enterprise owners socialist laborers? What kind of party are we really building, critiquing some locality's unauthorized admission of private business owners into the Communist Party? Private enterprise owners cannot join the Communist Party. Private enterprise owners cannot be selected as model workers. Capitalists are not laborers. How can a workers' party admit capitalists? These titles hit Chen Yiming's mind like bombs, tingling his scalp. He had never seen articles so sharply questioning major central decisions and spirits, especially in a publicly published magazine. "What do you think of these articles?" the senior leader asked, fiddling with a magnifying glass, the one he used to read documents and publications, indicating he had seriously read the articles in this magazine. As theoretical issues, they can be discussed, but as public dissent against the party's guiding ideology, it seems to violate party discipline. Chen Yiming chose his words carefully. "What do you think?" "Personally, I respect the authors of these articles.
They're all veteran comrades in ideological and theoretical circles and should be allowed to express their opinions. As Chairman Mao said long ago, letting people speak won't cause the sky to fall, the senior leader said, glancing at him. Regarding the issue of capitalists joining the party, many old comrades in the party had different opinions from the beginning, and some even wrote joint letters to the central leadership expressing opposition. Are there no provincial and ministerial level cadres who share such views among you? Chen Yiming felt that the senior leader's words clearly had a probing meaning, perhaps intended to draw out his opinion. But after much hesitation, he remained silent. It seems that the black hat of regional administrator weighing on your head has made you afraid to speak. The senior leader withdrew his gaze, saying with a half-smile. He put down his magnifying glass and continued, I'm now free of official duties, so as an ordinary party member, let me share my own views. Then the senior leader spoke frankly to Chen Yiming. The reason some old comrades question allowing capitalists to join the party isn't accidental. It involves the fundamental issue of whether our party can maintain its nature as the vanguard of the working class. And it's also a response to the make-up lesson theory popular in theoretical circles recently. For some time, certain scholars with bourgeois liberalization tendencies have been advocating that socialist countries should take capitalist make-up lessons. They argue that current socialist countries like Russia and China are economically and culturally backward countries where capitalism hasn't fully developed. They claim the socialist revolutions in these countries shouldn't have happened but did, calling them premature births and deformities. This view has been passed down from their ancestor Kautsky to the present. Therefore, they argue that taking make-up lessons is a necessary stage. The widespread circulation of this make-up lesson theory in our country is no coincidence. It's actually just an excuse for those suffering from capitalism worship disease to reject socialism and restore capitalism. If we write allowing capitalists to join the party into the party constitution, are we still the vanguard of the working class? Is the working class still our country's leading class? This series of questions can't help but make people think, even worry. The collapse of the Soviet Union and upheaval in Eastern Europe began with changes in guiding ideology and party membership composition. Achieving communism is still written in the party constitution, and Comrade Xiaoping's 4 cardinal principles put adhering to the socialist path and Marxism-Leninism Mao Zedong thought as the first 2 principles. Based on this alone, the argument for taking capitalist make-up lessons goes against Xiaoping's intentions. I recently reread selected works of Deng Xiaoping and had many new insights. For example, he said we've talked about common prosperity since the beginning of reform, and someday it will become the central issue. Socialism isn't about a few people getting rich while the majority remain poor. That's not what it should be. Socialism's greatest advantage is common prosperity. This embodies the essence of socialism. During his Southern tour, he emphasized again that polarization will occur if the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. The socialist system should and can prevent such polarization. When to prominently raise and solve this issue, and on what basis to raise and solve it, needs study. We can imagine that when we reach a moderately prosperous level at the end of this century, we should prominently raise and solve this issue. Now we're already in the early 21st century. Shouldn't we put common prosperity on our party's priority agenda? Chen Yiming had only seen or heard those safe, ambiguous documents and reports for many years. The senior leader's words were righteous and thought-provoking. Chen Yiming felt like some blocked vessel in his body had been cleared, blood rushing upward. He felt a long-absent excitement and emotion, deeply agreeing with the senior leader's words. However, he was no longer the young secretary who had just joined the senior leader's side. His identity as provincial party secretary gripped his throat like pliers, forcing him to suppress the words that had risen to his throat until his darkish face turned red from holding them back, releasing a long sigh from deep in his chest. The senior leader noticed Chen Yiming's subtle expression and seemed to realize he was too impulsive. He put the magnifying glass back on the tea table, leaned back against the chair, closed his eyes for about a minute, then opened them to a slit, looking at him through half-closed eyes and asking, "Jiming, do you think my thinking is a bit conservative, unable to keep up with the times?" "How could that be? You've always been a supporter and firm practitioner of reform. Even foreign media regard you as a reformist within our party," Chen Jiming said respectfully. Actually, these words weren't flattery, but genuine reverence. In the early days of reform and opening up, the senior leader had been sent by the central leadership to that southern province as first party secretary, implementing a series of bold reforms that tore open a path for the whole country to move from a planned economy to a market economy system. In Chen Yiming's eyes, the senior leader, like other leaders of the older generation, had made historic contributions to reform. The senior leader's earlier words weren't so much conservative as they reflected a reform pioneer's deep concerns about party and state affairs as reform entered deeper waters. In fact, Chen Yiming harbored similar concerns, but being in a frontline leadership position, he didn't have the time or energy to concentrate on considering these grand questions. Perhaps Chen Yiming's words had an effect, as the senior leader's expression relaxed and his half-closed eyes opened fully. He suddenly noticed that although the senior leader was over 90, his eyes weren't cloudy like most people that age, but remained bright and alert. "You're about to take office in Dongjiang?" the senior leader asked. "Yes, the organization department leadership just spoke with me," Chen Yiming nodded. "Senior leader, do you have any instructions?" "What instructions could I, a retired old man, possibly give?" The senior leader smiled, then suddenly seemed to remember something. "Actually, there is one matter." Chen Yiming responded with an "oh," and pulled out a notebook and pen from his briefcase. "What is it? Please tell me." "Recently, I saw in the internal reference materials that some workers at Dongjiang Steel Company gathered to protest, opposing Donggang's acquisition by an American company. There were even deaths, and central leadership made comments on the internal report. Have you heard about this?" "I've heard about it, but not in detail," Chen Yiming hedged. "I heard the relevant departments in Dongjiang have already investigated and handled it. If it's been handled, why are people still writing letters everywhere reporting the situation?" The senior leader frowned. "How did the local government investigate and handle it? If I were 10 years younger, I'd really want to go back to Dongjiang and conduct a field investigation myself, but now even taking a trip is difficult." As he spoke, the wrinkles on his face tightened, and he lightly pounded his leg with his hand a couple of times, looking at Chen Yiming. "After you go to Dongjiang, pay attention to the matter of Donggang. I started planning the Donggang project before transferring from Dongjiang to central work. The old workers there still remember me and wrote letters to me." Chen Yiming wrote in his notebook, agreeing, "Yes, I certainly will." Seeing his serious demeanor, the senior leader smiled and said, "All right, stop writing. You're no longer my secretary. You're a full-fledged provincial party secretary." Chen Yiming stopped writing and smiled sheepishly. The senior leader's mood had clearly improved from earlier. His expression was no longer so serious, and he gazed at Chen Yiming kindly, saying, "If your father knew you had become Dongjiang's provincial party secretary, he would be so happy." Chen Yiming knew the senior leader was recalling his experiences liberating Dongjiang with his father and General Hong Hu. He, too, thought of his long-deceased father, but as his mind wandered, he heard the senior leader continue, "Yiming, you're about to go to Dongjiang, and there are several things you need to pay attention to." This was the real purpose of Chen Yiming's visit to the senior leader. He quickly reached for his notebook and pen. Still, the senior leader waved his hand, pointing to his own forehead and saying, "The following words are just personal opinions. Don't write them in your notebook. Just record them here." Chen Yiming had no choice but to close his opened notebook. Black and White by Liu Jiming. Translated by Chen Gang. Part 3, Volume 2, continued. 2. Initial show of strength and Hornet's nest.
News of Chen Yiming's personal visit to Donggang to handle the second workers' gathering spread quickly among Dajiang city residents. Some praised his courage in facing the Donggang incident that had sparked the strongest public reaction, saying the nickname Hurricane Chen was well-deserved. Others said that during his dialogue with worker representatives, he announced on the spot that he would halt the merger project between Donggang and American Duku Corporation. Still others claimed he had been parachuted into Dongjiang as provincial party secretary on central authorities' instructions to resolve Dongjiang's problems. The stories spread with vivid details, sparking widespread speculation. Meanwhile, another version of events circulated among Dongjiang provincial cadres. They said Chen Yiming had rushed to Donggang without any warning, leaving Governor Luo and other standing committee members cooling their heels in Building 3's small conference room for half a day. This was clearly meant to show them who the boss was. Everyone knew the Donggang merger project had Governor Luo's support and was Vitsu Governor Yu's responsibility. Before this, there had been persistent rumors that Governor Luo might become party secretary and that Vitsu Governor Yu would succeed him as governor. Now, the new party secretary wanted to halt the Donggang project, not only publicly slapping their faces, but essentially putting the brakes on Dongjiang's reforms. Was this his personal opinion, or did it represent the central authorities' views? These true and false rumors soon reached Chen Yiming's ears. Since taking office, he had been spinning like a top every day, convening various meetings, hearing reports, reading documents, talking with cadres, and conducting research in cities, prefectures, and provincial departments and bureaus. How could he have spare time to care about private rumors? Moreover, some rumors were completely groundless and distorted facts. For instance, describing his joint meeting with cadres and workers at Donggang as a dialogue, or claiming he had halted rather than suggested temporarily suspending the merger project at the standing committee meeting. He didn't take these seriously and just shrugged them off. Soon after, when Chen Yiming returned from researching the most distant ethnic minority autonomous prefecture and convened a standing committee meeting, he found 6 of the 15 standing committee members absent, nearly half, including Governor Luo and Vitsu Governor Yu. Their absence was particularly noticeable as the 2 deputy secretaries and standing committee members in charge of government work. Chen Yiming inquired with Provincial Party Committee Secretary General Jiang Qingguo. Vitsu Governor Yu had to meet with a Taiwanese business delegation and couldn't possibly get away, while Governor Luo had been hospitalized due to illness. Seeing the party secretary's doubtful expression, Jiang Qingguo carefully explained, Governor Luo has 3 highs: high blood pressure, high blood sugar, and high cholesterol. He always carries medicine with him, but recently, even the medicine hasn't been working. All 3 indicators have been shooting up, and the doctor said he must be hospitalized for treatment. Chen Yiming said, "Oh," sweeping his gaze around the conference room again. Not seeing the youngest standing committee member, Propaganda Department head Lang Tao asked, "Why isn't Comrade Lang Tao here either?" Jiang Qingguo said, Director Lang went to Phoenix Island to inspect preparations for the Popular Arts Media Group's stock market listing ceremony. He just called to say he couldn't make it back. Chen Yiming didn't say anything more, but after the meeting, he tried calling Governor Luo Baochang, planning to visit him in the hospital. However, after several attempts, no one answered. While it wasn't unusual for 1 or 2 members to miss a standing committee meeting occasionally, having nearly half absent, including the governor and Ashutste Vitsu governor, wasn't normal. Could it be retaliation for making everyone wait all morning at the first standing committee meeting? If so, it would be understandable, at most just a bit childish. But when he thought about the recent rumors that had reached his ears, he felt things might not be so simple. Chen Yiming felt that while most of these rumors were far-fetched, they got one thing right. He had been parachuted into Dongjiang as party secretary, so any kind of situation wouldn't be surprising. He recalled when he was first transferred from Beijing to become the county chief of C County, not yet 30 years old. Because he disagreed with most standing committee members over handling petitioning workers from a state-owned enterprise, he was ignored at standing committee meetings. He remained isolated for a full 6 months, but hadn't he eventually broken through to a new situation? Over these many years, wherever he went, whether serving as county chief, mayor, city party secretary, or governor, when hadn't it taken tremendous effort to establish himself? Only after wading through water do you see mud on both legs. This was a favorite saying of Zhu Laozhong, the protagonist in the novel Red Flag Chronicle. Now, remembering this phrase, Chen Yiming pushed those on-key and off-key rumors to the back of his mind. Chen Yiming had loved reading novels since his youth, both Chinese and foreign. He loved any good novel. Back in his production and construction corps days, he had even tried writing novels himself, submitting them to publishers but receiving only a mimeographed rejection letter with no comments. From then on, he gave up thoughts of becoming a writer, but maintained his love of reading novels. He always carried a novel or two, no matter how busy work got. He had another hobby. He would make time to browse used bookstores whenever he transferred to a new place. This was a habit formed during his time as the senior leader's secretary. Browsing used bookstores as the senior leader's special way of understanding social conditions and public sentiment. During research trips to any location, the senior leader would have him come along to browse used bookstores, and they would always find some books unavailable in state-run Xinhua bookstores, usually old books and periodicals reflecting local customs and culture. If you want to understand local people's real lives, browsing used bookstores and buying old publications is the best shortcut, the senior leader would say. Since these used bookstores were usually located in out-of-the-way alleys and lanes, the senior leader also noted that only in such small streets could one see real common people's lives. Chen Yiming had always remembered the senior leader's words and gradually developed the habit of browsing used bookstores. After returning from the cities and prefectures, the most intensive research work had ended. Having a rare, leisurely weekend, Chen Yiming wanted to browse some used bookstores. Since taking office, he had been so busy he hadn't gone out for a single street walk. So Chen Yiming called Secretary Hu and asked him to come along for a street walk. Street walk was a term he had learned from his time with the senior leader, who would always just say street walk and never explicitly say browsing used bookstores. Secretary Hu was somewhat surprised. Street walk? Chen Yiming heard Secretary Hu's surprise through the phone and added, "Oh, I want to browse used bookstores." Secretary Hu still found it unexpected because, in most people's view, browsing used bookstores was a hobby of cultured intellectuals, and he clearly didn't believe a provincial party secretary would have such a hobby. What surprised Secretary Hu even more was that the party secretary didn't call for a car to browse used bookstores, but dragged him along to squeeze onto public buses. Interesting. Secretary Hu muttered quietly while waiting with Chen Yiming for the bus at the roadside in front of the Provincial Party Committee compound. Chen Yiming heard him and asked, "What's interesting?" Secretary Hu hesitantly mumbled, "I was just thinking of a TV drama I recently watched, the story of Emperor Kangshi's incognito visits." Chen Yiming understood Secretary Hu's meaning and asked with a laugh, "Ha ha, are you praising me or criticizing me?" Secretary Hu adjusted his glasses, sliding down to the tip of his nose, unable to answer for a moment. Secretary Hu was a new secretary assigned to Chen Yiming by the Provincial Party Committee office after he took office in Dongjiang. In official circles, there was an unwritten convention that when high-ranking cadres transferred or were promoted, they could bring their original secretaries to their new posts. The reasoning was that secretaries had the closest relationship with leaders, best understood their daily habits and work methods, and frequent changes would be detrimental to work. Thus emerged a phenomenon. Leaders might change positions several times, but their secretaries remained unchanged. Though not explicitly stated in cadre management regulations, this practice was essentially acknowledged or at least tacitly permitted. However, the drawbacks of this convention were obvious. Because secretaries stayed with leaders for too long, they gradually became involved in both the leaders' work and private lives, some even forming improper alliances and dependent relationships, essentially becoming breeding grounds for corruption. The recent exposure of Hebei Provincial Party Secretary Cheng Weigao's corruption case involving his secretary was a prominent example. Chen Yiming remembered that the senior leader had criticized this irregular convention more than once, advocating for term limits for leaders' secretaries, no more than 3 years per assignment, and had started with himself. As a result, Chen Yiming's tenure as secretary lasted just 3 years before the senior leader had him move on. However, the senior leader's proposal faced strong opposition from many party leaders and ultimately wasn't implemented. Later, when Chen Yiming became governor of Province B, he didn't bring his previous secretary with him, effectively putting into practice the senior leader's stillborn initiative. He did the same when he came to Dongjiang as party secretary. He felt that abolishing this convention of leaders bringing their secretaries to new posts would not only cut off potential breeding grounds for corruption between leaders and secretaries, but also had another advantage. When leaders took new positions with new secretaries, it could help them quickly familiarize themselves with and integrate into the local work and living environment, especially if the secretary was a local person with practical work experience. This became an important criterion in Chen Yiming's selection of a secretary after taking office. Secretary Hu, recommended by Provincial Party Committee Secretary General Zhang Qingguo, was named Hu Xiangyang. He graduated from Dongjiang University's Chinese department, worked as a middle school teacher for several years, and later became an editor at a provincial newspaper and publishing house. He had recently transferred to the first secretarial division of the Provincial Party Committee office, which specialized in drafting meeting speeches for provincial leaders. He was a very capable wordsmith. What impressed Chen Yiming wasn't Hu Xiangyang's credentials from Dongjiang University's Chinese department, but rather his experience as a middle school teacher and publishing house editor. From their interactions during research trips to various cities and prefectures, Chen Yiming was fairly satisfied with this new secretary, which was why he asked him to come along and browse used bookstores. The street in front of the Provincial Party Committee compound was formerly called Willow Lane, which sounded elegant and poetic. However, the buildings on both sides were rather dilapidated. Considering the image of the Provincial Party Committee compound, the Municipal Construction Department had obtained special funding from the provincial leadership at the time to renovate and refurbish the street completely. To demonstrate a progressive and open attitude, the designers not only transformed the original Chinese-style architecture into European style, but also added many fashionable entertainment, dining, and leisure establishments. The street was completely renewed inside and out, even changing its name to European-style Street. Previously, there had been no bus stops on this street, but now 2 routes stopped there. However, there were never many bus passengers due to low-foot traffic. At this moment, only Chen Yiming and Hu Xiangyang were waiting at the bus stop. Taking advantage of this time, Chen Yiming started chatting with his secretary. "Secretary Hu, have you heard any discussions lately?" Hu Xiangyang, wearing wide-rimmed glasses that gave him a scholarly appearance, seemed confused by Chen Yiming's question and asked in return, What kind of discussions?" Chen Yiming smiled slightly and suggested, "For example, about me and about Donggang." Hu Xiangyang didn't answer immediately. Instead, he habitually adjusted his glasses, seemingly finding the party secretary's question rather tricky and pondering how to respond appropriately. "Don't worry, just tell me the truth." Chen Yiming noticed his hesitation and prompted. Clearly, he was using this chat with his secretary as another way to understand social conditions and public opinion. "I've heard," Hu Xiangyang glanced at Chen Yiming, gathering considerable courage to say, "that as soon as you arrived in Dongjiang, you showed everyone who's boss and stirred up a hornet's nest." Hu Xiangyang's words were vague, not specifying who was shown who's boss or what hornet's nest was stirred up, but from his evasive manner, Chen Yiming couldn't help connecting it to the recent rumors he'd heard. He made an interested "oh" sound. "Could you be more specific?" But Hu Xiangyang didn't continue, instead averting his gaze to one side. Just then, 2 people dressed like local residents also came to wait for the bus. One young man wearing a casual jacket stared intently at Chen Yiming, who was similarly dressed in a casual jacket, his expression suggesting he might have recognized him. Although Chen Yiming had only recently taken office, not only ordinary citizens but also many cadres in the Provincial Party Committee compound might not recognize him. It was possible some had seen him on television. Perhaps out of concern for the party secretary's safety or to change the subject, Hu Shangyang whispered to Chen Yiming, "Secretary, this bus route is rarely frequent on normal days, even less so on weekends. Once I waited 2 hours and still couldn't see a bus. Should we just take a taxi instead?" Chen Yiming looked at his watch, saw it was getting late, and had to agree. Shortly after, a blue taxi drove by empty. Hu Shangyang hailed it and quickly opened the door, keeping one hand on top of the doorframe while waiting for Chen Yiming to get in before taking the front passenger seat himself. After the taxi started moving, he saw through the rearview mirror that the young man in the casual jacket was still staring intently at them. Hu Shangyang was sure that he had recognized the party secretary. 3. Used bookstore. Chen Yiming had found the right person when he asked his secretary, Hu Shangyang, to accompany him while browsing used bookstores. Before entering graduate school in Dongjiang University's Chinese department, Hu Shangyang had taught at Dongjiang Normal College's affiliated middle school. To buy study materials for his graduate entrance exam, he frequently visited bookstores, and for a period he had explored almost every used bookstore in Dajiang City. Thus, no one in the Provincial Party Committee compound could compare with him regarding using bookstores. He was particularly familiar with several used bookstores near the Normal College. Not only had he found the graduate exam materials he needed there, but he had also discovered many old books and periodicals from the Cultural Revolution and even the pre-liberation era. Hu Shangyang was naturally drawn to historical and literary materials, with a special fondness for old books. Knowing the value of such books in the collector's market, he treasured his discoveries and would rush to the used bookstores whenever he had free time, becoming a regular customer. Even after entering graduate school and becoming an editor at the newspaper and publishing house, he would still visit these few used bookstores whenever possible. However, with Dajiang City's rapid real estate development in recent years, old buildings were being demolished in large sections almost daily, with new residential complexes sprouting up like bamboo shoots after rain. The used bookstores Hu Shangyang knew well had vanished in this wave of demolition and construction until only the People's Bookstore beside Dongjiang Normal College's gate remained. Since transferring to work at the Provincial Party Committee office, Hu Shangyang had become much busier than when he was an editor at the publishing house. Writing speeches for leaders often required working overtime, leaving him no spare time to browse used bookstores. Therefore, when he received Provincial Party Secretary Chen Yiming's call asking him to come along to browse used bookstores, the first place he thought of was the People's Bookstore. When Hu Shangyang stepped out of the taxi and saw the original wooden signboard had rotted and split in half, with only People's Store remaining of the 4 characters that once read People's Bookstore, its dilapidated appearance made him hardly believe this was the same used bookstore he had visited countless times. The once bustling store was now desolate, with few customers, and the bookshelves were sparsely filled, like a field ravaged by disaster. Hu Shangyang stood at the entrance, hesitant to step inside, looking bewildered as if he had come to the wrong place. Just then, Chen Yiming walked up from behind, raised his head to examine the decrepit signboard, and read out the 2 remaining characters. People's Store. His voice caught as if something had stuck in his throat, and he turned to ask quizzically, "Is this the bookstore?" "Yes," Hu Shangyang hesitated, using an uncertain tone to speak the store's full name. "The People's Bookstore." "The People's Bookstore, that's a good name." Chen Yiming repeated the store's name and stepped inside. The store hadn't turned on its lights, making it rather dim. Chen Yiming had barely taken 2 steps when his foot caught on something, causing a clattering sound. Hu Shangyang, who was walking behind, quickly stepped forward and saw that a stool in the aisle between bookshelves had been knocked over. As he bent down to right it,
someone emerged from behind the bookshelf and said irritably, "What's wrong with you? Don't you have eyes?" Chen Yiming hurriedly reached to help with the fallen stool, repeatedly apologizing. I'm sorry." Hu Shangyang felt the person's attitude was somewhat rough. Wanting to defend the offended party secretary's dignity, he replied sharply, "Your store has no lights on. It's too dark, and you've put a stool in the aisle. Anyone would trip over it." Hearing this, the person seemed to get even angrier, glaring at Hu Shangyang. "What? So you knock over my stool and you're in the right?" Hu Shangyang had never seen this person before and found him unreasonable. His own temper began to rise, and just as the two seemed about to start arguing, Chen Yiming pulled at Hu Shangyang's sleeve, saying, "It was my fault for not looking carefully. The responsibility is entirely mine." Hearing Chen Yiming speak this way, the person's attitude softened, and he stopped talking. He seemed to realize he bore some responsibility and turned to flip on the wall light switch with a sharp click, suddenly brightening the dim store. This gesture and scene felt very familiar to Hu Shangyang, as if he had seen it before. The same turn, the same sharp click, and the lights coming on. The difference was that before, it had been a tall, elderly man with white hair and a military bearing, probably in his 70s. He was wearing an old military uniform from who knows which era, holding a feather duster with dusty sleeve protectors on his arms. That old man was the store owner whom Hu Shangyang would see on every visit. The old man had become familiar with him and would always nod in greeting, showing a very kind attitude. Hu Shangyang had bought many old books there, and the old man knew what types he liked, sometimes actively recommending 1 or 2 books and offering reasonable prices. Once, Hu Shangyang had unexpectedly met Wang Sheng at the People's Bookstore. Wang Sheng was his graduate school classmate, and they had maintained a good relationship. When Hu Shangyang was an editor at the Provincial newspaper, he often asked Wang Sheng to contribute articles. After transferring to the publishing house, he had also commissioned a book manuscript from Wang Sheng. That day, after meeting Wang Sheng at the People's Bookstore, Hu Shangyang learned that the old man was called Liu Jiming, who had done underground work in Dazhong City before liberation, and the People's Bookstore had been an underground party contact point. Wang Sheng's father and Liu Jiming had been wartime comrades. They were the ones who had raised the first 5-starred red flag over Dazhong City's customs building. Now, Hu Shangyang studied the person before him, around 50 years old, wearing a wrinkled suit that looked like it came from a second-hand market, and holding a feather duster without sleeve protectors. In his daze, his mind flashed back to that legendary old man he used to see in the store. Back then, the store wasn't as quiet as now. Occasionally, groups of middle school students would come in, browsing the shelves while chattering softly, their clear laughter ringing out. They were students from Dongjiang Normal College's affiliated middle school, often coming to hunt for high school or middle school entrance exam review materials. The man noticed Hu Shangyang studying him and seemed uncomfortable. "Are you the owner?" Hu Shangyang asked tentatively, but the man just glanced at him without answering, appearing somewhat wary. "I used to come here often to buy books, and I knew the previous owner," Hu Shangyang added, worried about causing a misunderstanding. "But I haven't been here for a long time. I didn't expect the owner had changed." But before he could finish, the man coldly interrupted. "He didn't change. He's gone." "What? Gone?" Hu Shangyang was stunned, not immediately understanding. He stared at the man, noticed the black armband on his sleeve, saw the sudden sadness that crossed his face, and finally understood. Though he couldn't really be considered close to the old man, a wave of sadness passed through him. "So that's what happened," he murmured. "When did the old man pass away?" "Less than 2 months ago," the man muttered. "It's better this way, spares him the suffering." Hu Shangyang was somewhat surprised, not understanding why he would say this, and secretly tried to figure out the man's relationship with the old owner. Son? Apprentice? He seemed both like and unlike either role. While he was puzzling over this, the man apparently guessed his thoughts and said, "I'm not the new owner. I'm just managing it temporarily until the new owner comes out." Hu Xiangyang was startled again. "Comes out? From where?" "Prison," the man uttered these two words. Hu Xiangyang grew even more curious and was about to ask for details when Chen Yiming walked over holding an old book with a craft paper cover, as if he had found some rare treasure. "Boss, how much is this?" Perhaps it was his authentic northern accent or his tall, straight bearing, but when the man took the book from Chen Yiming's hand, his gaze fixed on his face, staring intently. Suddenly he let out an "Ah!" and the old book dropped from his hands. The man's mouth fell open, and pointing at Chen Yiming, he stammered, You're... Hu Xiangyang realized the man had obviously recognized Chen Yiming. With a secretary's instinct, he stepped in front of Chen Yiming and asked warily, "What do you want?" The man ignored Hu Xiangyang and continued staring at Chen Yiming. "I recognize you. You're the new provincial party secretary." Although there were no other customers in the store, Hu Xiangyang worried that more people might recognize Chen Yiming, posing a threat to the party secretary's safety. Protecting the leader's safety was a secretary's key responsibility, so he coldly told the man, "You've got the wrong person." He tugged at Chen Yiming's arm to leave, but Chen Yiming didn't move. Instead, he met the man's gaze and said frankly, "I am Chen Yiming." Chen Yiming's voice wasn't loud, but in the quiet store it sounded very clear, as if coming through a loudspeaker with a humming echo. Hu Xiangyang looked at the party secretary's slightly smiling face, feeling somewhat at a loss. He heard Chen Yiming ask in a conversational tone, "I'm a bit curious. How did you recognize me?" The man, who had been staring at Chen Yiming, shifted his gaze and stammered, "Last time I saw you at Donggang." "So you're from Donggang?" Chen Yiming made a sound of recognition. "Were you part of the gathering before Donggang's office building?" The man hesitated before answering. "Yes." "That day I convened an on-site joint meeting with cadres and workers. Did you participate?" Chen Yiming continued asking. "No, I didn't have that qualification," the man said, then added, "but my in-law participated and even spoke." Chen Yiming's eyes brightened. "What's your in-law's name?" "He's called Gu Jirgen, a retired engineer from Donggang." Chen Yiming made another sound of recognition, recalling the engineer's speech he had heard at Donggang, while also remembering what Donggang's chairman and party secretary Chu Dongliang had whispered to him. His in-law was a famous rebel faction leader during the Cultural Revolution and served as head of Donggang's Revolutionary Committee. He couldn't help but look at the man more carefully. He casually asked, "Do you agree with Engineer Gu's speech?" "Of course I agree. Engineer Gu's words represent the majority at Donggang, and they represent me too," the man replied without hesitation. However what?" Chen Yiming asked. "Donggang's problems go far beyond what he mentioned." Seeing his hesitant expression, Chen Yiming said, "What other problems are there? Can you tell me specifically?" He pulled out a small notebook and pen from his jacket pocket. The man was clearly encouraged by this gesture from the party secretary. After a slight pause, he said, "Donggang's party secretary and chairman Chu Dongliang isn't just greedy for money. He's also a huge lecher. My daughter, Cheng Lei, was a performer in the cultural troupe, now called the Workers' Art Troupe. She was dismissed because she refused to be his plaything. During the last riot, my son-in-law injured Chu Dongliang. The lawyer said it was negligent injury, but the court convicted him of retaliatory injury and sentenced him to 3 years. The man spoke rather quickly in his local dialect, and Chen Yiming wrote in his notebook, occasionally stopping his pen to ask about dialect words he didn't understand. His thick, black eyebrows furrowed deeper and deeper. His concentrated expression made him seem to forget he was a customer who had come to browse books, appearing more like a petition office worker receiving a visitor. "Where does your daughter work now?" "After my daughter was dismissed, she first danced at a nightclub in a hotel. After my son-in-law was sentenced, she couldn't continue working at the hotel, so she switched to another place, still doing her old profession." After hearing the man's account, Chen Yiming closed his notebook and extended his hand. The man hesitated before extending his own. "Could you tell me your name?" Chen Yiming asked while shaking his hand. "My name is Cheng Guojun. Chu Dongliang has probably already reported to you that I've been in prison before. I'm one of what you call the 3 categories of people." The man hesitated before saying, "But please believe me. You can have me arrested if I've said one false word." Chen Yiming nodded and said, "Don't worry. The Provincial Party Committee will carefully resolve Donggang's issues, and I'll also forward the situation you've reported to the relevant departments." Then, he walked toward the store exit. Hu Shangyang could never have imagined that the party secretary who came to browse books would turn the used bookstore into a petition office reception window, and that the middle-aged man from the bookstore would transform into a petitioner. This dramatic transformation left him dumbfounded. During the conversation between the party secretary and Cheng Guojun, he had become a complete bystander. Now, as if a play had finally drawn its curtain, Hu Shangyang came to his senses and picked up the old book Chen Yiming had found. He glanced at the cover. It was Ostrovsky's Born of the Storm, published by Kaofeng Publishing House in 1953, a traditional vertical text edition priced at 13,600 yuan, old currency. Hu Shangyang didn't know how much that was converted into new currency, but this edition must have been quite valuable. However, he had no time to calculate carefully. He took out a 50 yuan note from his pocket, placed it on the counter, and followed Chen Yiming out of the store. As they left, Cheng Guojun still stood at the entrance watching them go. While waiting for a taxi by the roadside, Hu Shangyang noticed Chen Yiming deep in thought, seemingly still absorbed in his conversation with Cheng Guojun. "So," he said, "you shouldn't completely believe what that Cheng Guojun said. You mean because he's been in prison, or because he's one of the 3 categories of people?" Chen Yiming said with a half-smile. "Seeking truth from facts, neither dismissing words because of the person nor dismissing the person because of their words. This has always been our party's principle." "It's not just that." Hu Shangyang recalled some details he had seen in his classmate Wang Sheng's manuscript and said hesitantly, "Cheng Guojun's ex-wife is Song Xiaofan, a famous female writer. Song Xiaofan's father is Song Lao, Song Qiankun." Hu Shangyang's explanation was becoming convoluted, like a crosstalk performance. Chen Yiming made a soft recognition sound when he heard the name Song Qiankun. Thinking Chen Yiming might not know who Song Qiankun was, Hu Shangyang explained, "Song Lao is our province's elder statesman who has served through 3 eras. He once led both the Provincial Party Committee and the government. Governor Luo even served as his secretary." "Yes, I know," Chen Yiming said thoughtfully, then instructed Hu Shangyang, "I've been too busy lately and haven't had time to pay respects to these old comrades. When I have some free time, arrange for me to visit Song Laos through the general office for visit." A few days later, Chen Yiming visited Song Qiankun, accompanied by his secretary, Hu Shangyang, and Provincial Party Committee Secretary-General Jiang Qingguo. Since becoming Provincial Party Secretary, among the dozen or so standing committee members, Chen Yiming had interacted most frequently with Jiang Qingguo. He had a good impression of this young Provincial Party Secretary-General. Jiang executed any decisions the Provincial Party Committee made swiftly and decisively, never dragging things out or compromising, maintaining an excellent balance between principle and flexibility. Under his leadership, the General Office functioned remarkably well as the Party Committee's central department. His only slight shortcoming was that Jiang Qingguo's personality was too mild, his excessive carefulness often slipping into bureaucratism, a defect for a leading cadre. But as Provincial Party Secretary-General, this could hardly be considered a flaw and might even be counted as a virtue. After all, the General Office's work itself required a degree of bureaucratism. Nevertheless, Chen Yiming felt Jiang Qingguo was too mature and steady for his age, lacking the sharp edge and drive that cadres his age should have. Chen was only in his 40s. At that age, he had feared nothing and dared to think and act boldly. How else would he have earned the nickname Hurricane Chen?
In comparison, Chen Yiming felt that propaganda department head Lang Tao, who was equally young and had been promoted to the Provincial Party Standing Committee at the same time, had more edge and vitality than Zhang Qingguo. This might have been related to Zhang's cautious habits developed from long-term work in the provincial party offices. Chen Yiming and Zhang Qingguo sat in the same car. Although Zhang Qingguo usually accompanied Chen Yiming to many major events, they always took separate cars and didn't interact much. This was their first time traveling in the same vehicle, so Zhang Qingguo seemed somewhat uncomfortable. After leaving the Provincial Party Committee compound, he hadn't spoken, creating an awkward atmosphere until Chen Yiming finally broke the silence. "Comrade Qingguo, you've worked in the general office for a long time. You must be quite familiar with Old Song." "I wouldn't say familiar. When I was assigned to the 1st Division after university graduation, Old Song was deputy party secretary and Ishutste Vitsukh governor in charge of provincial government work. He spent most of his time at the provincial government offices, so I rarely had the chance to interact with him," Zhang Qingguo said modestly. "At that time, my immediate superior was Governor Luo, who was then our division's deputy director and Old Song's secretary. However, Old Song soon retired. Zhang Qingguo had been leaning back in the rear seat, appearing slightly shorter than Chen Yiming. However, as he answered Chen's question, he sat up slightly, making them the same height. This only made Zhang's slim figure appear even more slight next to Chen Yiming's tall, robust frame. "I heard that Old Song was originally supposed to become provincial party secretary. Why did he retire instead?" Hearing Chen Yiming suddenly raise this question, Zhang Qingguo was somewhat surprised. Such high-level personnel matters, especially from many years ago, Zhang had only learned about later. Yet, this party secretary, who had only been in office for a few months, already knew about it, showing he was quite well informed about Old Song's situation. Realizing this, Zhang Qingguo became even more cautious in his response. "Well, perhaps because Old Song had reached retirement age?" Hearing Zhang Qingguo's ambiguous answer, Chen Yiming understood what the other man was concerned about and fell silent. He recalled what the senior leader had told him during his last visit to Beijing, the most important content concerning Song Qiankun. When the senior leader served as provincial party secretary in Dongjiang, Song Qiankun remained deputy head of the propaganda department. Before the senior leader's transfer to the central government, he planned to promote Song to head the provincial party propaganda department. However, someone reported that Song was suspected of betraying party secrets and defecting just before liberation, leading to his suspension pending investigation. Song Qiankun had been a leader of the Dajiang Underground Party Committee. To be thorough, the senior leader personally investigated the case. He discovered there were indeed several suspicious points, and the informant was Song Qiankun's former subordinate. Still, due to a lack of direct evidence, they couldn't conclude and had to report it to the central authorities. Later, the central authorities dismissed the case for lack of evidence, not only restoring Song Qiankun to his original position, but also, shortly after the senior leader's transfer from Dongjiang to a central position, promoting him to Provincial Party Secretary Committee member and head of propaganda. The senior leader later learned that General Hong Hu's intervention in Song Qiankun's case led to this outcome. Hong Hu was Song Qiankun's brother-in-law through his marriage to his cousin. Back then, the senior leader led troops to liberate Dajiang alongside Hong Hu and Chen Yiming's father, and he always respected General Hong Hu. Although he didn't believe Hong Hu had shown favoritism in Song Qiankun's case, he felt the suspicious points in the case had never been cleared up. Therefore, in the late 1980s, when the central authorities sought his opinion before preparing to appoint Song Qiankun as Dongjiang Provincial Party Secretary, he voiced his opposition out of responsibility to the party's cause. At that time, Song Qiankun was 64 years old, and according to regulations for provincial-level cadres, could have served one term as provincial party secretary. However, due to the senior leader's opposition, he ultimately failed at the final hurdle. It was said that when Song Qiankun learned of this, he bitterly cursed the senior leader in front of General Hong Hu. Although I cut off Song Qiankun's path to promotion, objectively speaking, he was talented and capable. He was accomplished in both civil and military matters, with an active mind. Chairman Mao even praised him as a talented person in our party. However, precisely because of this, he was sometimes too clever for his own good. Between personal career advancement and the party's cause, he often couldn't distinguish which should take priority. His opportunistic and factional tendencies were serious, and he easily lost sight of his ideals and beliefs. Such people existed in both wartime and peacetime, causing considerable damage to the party and the nation's cause. Chairman Mao seriously pointed this out in Reform Our Study. As the senior leader spoke, his expression grew serious. It wasn't accidental that Song Qiankun made mistakes in the Villa incident of the 1980s. Even without the historical suspicion of betrayal, entrusting him with major responsibilities would have been difficult. Therefore, the central authorities' decisions regarding his appointment were wise. Chen Yiming didn't understand why the senior leader wanted to discuss Song Qiankun, whom he wasn't very familiar with, and he felt somewhat confused. Later, the senior leader told him that although Song Qiankun had retired for many years, he still maintained deep connections in Dongjiang, with many leading cadres being his former subordinates. The current governor used to be Song Qiankun's secretary. The central government originally considered him to take over as the secretary of the Dongjiang Provincial Party Committee, but finally decided to transfer a provincial party secretary from another place to avoid the further expansion of localism and sectarianism, which would affect the economic and social development of Dongjiang. After hearing this, Chen Yiming finally understood the leader's true intention. On the way to visit Song Qiankun, Chen Yiming asked Zhang Qingguo, Secretary General of the Provincial Party Committee, another question. I heard that the general manager of Duku China, which participated in the acquisition of Donggang, is Mr. Song's son-in-law, right? Chen Yiming's question once again surprised Zhang Qingguo. Although this secretary had only been in office for a few months, what he knew was far beyond his expectations. It seems so, he said vaguely. However, the last time Duku Company's general manager Bai came to inspect Donggang, he was received by Vitsu Governor Yu and Minister Lang, and I did not attend. Chen Yiming frowned. He was obviously not satisfied with Zhang Qingguo's answer. Still, when he thought about the fact that Governor Luo Baochang did not promote Zhang, and the reason he was able to become a member of the standing committee was because before the old secretary stepped down, Luo Baochang strongly recommended Lang Tao to be the Minister of Propaganda. In order to strike a balance, he promoted Zhang Qingguo, who was about the same age and had similar qualifications as Lang Tao. He understood the other party's attitude. The reason I'm talking to you about this is so that you can be fully prepared. Don't expect to open up the situation quickly in one fell swoop. You must grasp the main contradiction. Once you grasp the main contradiction, other minor contradictions will be easily resolved. Chen Yiming recalled what the leader said when he was in Beijing and felt that he might have grasped the main contradiction now. It takes less than a quarter of an hour to get from the Provincial Party Committee compound to South Lake. While Chen Yiming and Zhang Qingguo talked, the car unknowingly drove into No. 1 South Lake Road. Secretary Hu Shangyang, 2 other cadres from the general office, and 2 people from the provincial newspaper and provincial TV station had arrived at Song Qiankun's villa in advance. As soon as the car Chen Yiming and Zhang Qingguo were in stopped, they came to greet them. Hu Shangyang was holding a bouquet of flowers just bought from the flower shop, which was intended for Song Qiankun. Zhang Qingguo whispered to Hu Shangyang and asked him something, then made a please gesture to Chen Yiming, and the group walked to the villa's door. When Chen Yiming and Zhang Qingguo walked in, they saw an elderly woman with silver curly hair, graceful and elegant, waiting for them in the living room. Zhang Qingguo walked over quickly, shook her hand, and said respectfully, "Hello, Director Luo. Secretary Yiming has taken time out of his busy schedule to visit Mr. Song." Then he introduced Chen Yiming,
Secretary Yiming, this is Mr. Song's wife, Comrade Luo Yi, who is also the director of our Provincial Senior Cadres Chorus. Luo Yi's well-maintained face showed a reserved but enthusiastic smile. She took Chen Yiming's hand and said, "Thank you, Secretary. Lao Song has been in poor health recently and cannot come downstairs to greet you. I have to ask you to go upstairs." "Oh, is it serious? Does he need to go to the hospital?" Chen Yiming asked with concern. Luo Yi said, "He just returned from the hospital recently. He is old and has old problems." "Song Lao is over 80, right?" Luo Yi smiled and said, 90 next year. The two exchanged a few pleasantries and went upstairs. Chen Yiming and Luo Yi walked in front, followed by Zhang Qingguo and others. When they walked into the office study room, they saw Song Qiankun wearing pajamas and hearing aids, half lying and half leaning on a large sofa, with sparse white hair drooping on his head and a haggard face. When he saw Chen Yiming walk in, he held onto the sofa and tried to stand up, but his legs were trembling and he couldn't move. Seeing this, Chen Yiming took a few quick steps forward to support him. "Song Lao, don't get up!" After Song Qiankun sat down, Chen Yiming took the bouquet of flowers from Hu Xiangyang, handed it to him, and said, "Song Lao, I'm here to visit you on behalf of the Provincial Party Committee. I wish you good health and longevity." Song Qiankun raised his eyelids and looked at Chen Yiming with a dull expression, as if he didn't hear his words clearly. His wife, Luo Yi, leaned close to his ear and said, "The new Provincial Party Secretary is here to see you," and took the bouquet of flowers from Chen Yiming. "Song Lao, I should have come to see you long ago, but I was too busy." Chen Yiming sat down opposite Song Qiankun and at the same time looked at this senior who was of the same generation as his father. His mind once again echoed the words the leader said in Beijing, and a complex feeling surged in his heart. As a younger generation, he may not have the right to comment on the grievances between the older generations, and history will make a fair assessment of them. But at this moment, when he saw the two slightly upturned folds of flesh at the corners of Song Qiankun's loose mouth and the eyes that shot out from the drooping slits of his eyes, revealing a stubbornness, he couldn't help but think of the rumors he had heard. "Chen Yiming, I know you. Your father is Chen Dage." Song Qiankun leaned back slightly as if this was the only way to see Chen Yiming clearly. "Back then, your father and General Hong Hu liberated Dajiang. I never thought that his son would be the top leader of Dongjiang now." "Yes, my father wrote about it in his memoirs. You are a talented person in our party. I have read your novel, The Majestic Song of the Great River, written in the 1950s. Chen Yiming said, "I also know that your daughter Song Xiaofan is also a writer. I like her novel Utopia very much. I haven't had the chance to read her new work, To the 1980s, which has just been published. She's just a playgirl, nothing like you, the famous Chen Whirlwind. There aren't many young provincial party secretaries like you in the country, right?" Song Qiankun turned his gaze from Chen Yiming to Zhang Qingguo, who was sitting next to him as if asking him. But he immediately turned his gaze back to Chen Yiming and said in the tone of an elder to a younger person, "When you were the governor of Province B, you were known for your bold reforms. Don't become conservative after becoming the provincial party secretary of Dongjiang." There was clearly something behind this sentence. Chen Yiming sighed inwardly. Although the old man in front of him was slow in his movements and his speech was a little unclear, his mind was not confused at all. He couldn't help but think of the rumors he had heard some time ago, which set him against Governor Luo Baochang and Vitsui Governor Yu, who advocated the Donggang merger project, as if he had become a conservative and those people had become reformists. Behind those people stood this old leader of Dongjiang province, who had retired many years before. Chen Yiming knew what these discussions meant. He visited Song Qiankun today and asked Zhang Qingguo to arrange for reporters to accompany him to break the mystery deliberately created by some people. "Song Lao, don't worry. Reform is the main theme of China today. I will be a good squad leader and ensure that Dongjiang's reform does not stop or deviate from its course." Chen Yiming said as if to make a statement, emphasizing the 3 words, "do not deviate from its course." When Chen Yiming said this, the reporter from the provincial newspaper stood next to him, concentrating on taking notes, while the reporter from the TV station pointed the camera at him. The strong spotlight made it difficult for him to open his eyes. After talking for a while, Chen Yiming saw that Song Qiangkun's eyelids were drooping, and he was exhausted, so he stood up and said goodbye. He went downstairs to the living room on the first floor. In a caring tone, he asked Luo Yi, who had sent him downstairs, "Do you and Song Lao have any difficulties in life?" "If we talk about difficulties," Luo Yi hesitated and said, "everything else is fine, but the heating at home is often cut off. Not only can Lao Song not bear it at his age, but my daughter can't bear it when she returns for the new year. However, this problem is not limited to our family. The whole of South Lake Road Special Number 1 is like this." Chen Yiming said, "Oh," turned to Zhang Qingguo and asked, "Comrade Qingguo, please personally inquire about this issue and let the general office solve it. Old comrades are the wealth of our party, and we must take good care of their lives." Zhang Qingguo immediately said, "Okay, I'll ask the general office to send someone to solve it when I return." Chen Yiming and Luo Yi shook hands and said goodbye. "Aunt Luo, your careful care for Song Lao is also a contribution to the party. On behalf of the organization, I thank you." Chen Yiming's Aunt Luo words made Luo Yi feel very comfortable. He repeatedly said, "Thank you for your concern, Secretary. I am in good health now. We can solve the difficulties in life by ourselves and try not to trouble the organization. When I am old and can't move, I can only rely on the organization." "You don't look old at all," Chen Yiming said half seriously and half jokingly. "You and Song Lao look like 2 generations apart." Luo Yi was pleased to hear this and chuckled twice. She was about 20 years younger than Song Qiangkun and did not look old. 5. Hidden Spring Garden. Chen Yiming lived in Hidden Spring Garden, a compound separated from the Provincial Committee compound by just a single wall. Hidden Spring Garden was originally the private estate of Sun Wu, a hero of the Xinhai Revolution. Sun Wu's grandfather, Sun Yunzhong, was a famous general of the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom who had notably defeated Zheng Guofan's Shang army in Sanhe Town, Anhui Province. For his meritorious defense of the Taiping capital Tianjing, he was granted the title of Gan Tianyan by the Heavenly King Hong Shuquan, a high-ranking nobility title at a time when noble titles were not yet arbitrarily bestowed. After the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom's fall, Sun Yunzhong narrowly escaped with his life, returning to his rural home Moon to live in seclusion. He was blessed with a grandson in his 60s, the future Sun Wu. Sun Wu was precocious and intelligent. Growing up listening to his grandfather's stories about the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, he developed an early love for martial pursuits, enjoying archery, horseback riding, and martial arts. During that era of military examinations, which primarily tested archery, horseback riding, and combat skills, Sun Wu even had ambitions of becoming a martial champion. It was the period of the 100 Days Reform, and calls for military self-strengthening were high among young people. Sun Wu entered the military preparatory school with his early martial training motto, "Cultivating talents and building morale." After graduating, he traveled to Japan to study explosive device manufacturing techniques. At the time, Sun Zhongshan had established the Revolutionary Alliance in Japan. Sun Wu found the alliance's slogan, "Expelling the Manchu and Restoring China," to be deeply resonant with the ideals he had heard from his grandfather about the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom. He secretly joined the Revolutionary Alliance. Soon after, entrusted by Sun Zhongshan with the mission of planning an armed uprising to overthrow Manchu rule, Sun Wu secretly returned to China. He purchased a bankrupt merchant's old residence in Dajiang City, which he renovated and expanded. For this estate, he spent a fortune bringing a designer from Beijing, almost exhausting the entire inheritance from his grandfather. The expanded residence nearly doubled in scale and far surpassed its previous architectural quality and taste. The entire compound was primarily landscaped, with modest buildings mainly featuring small-scale pitched tile roofs without decorative paintings. The garden walls were constructed of tiger-skin stones, with earth mounds replacing elaborate rockeries. The garden wasn't just filled with pools, ancient trees, and vines, but also cultivated rare flowers and trees like winter-sweet, lilac, magnolia, peony, peach, apricot, and grape, creating an atmosphere both elegantly scholarly and aristocratically romantic. Sun Wu's massive investment in this luxurious estate was not for personal enjoyment, but to disguise his true purpose of preparing an uprising to restore the Ming dynasty. Publicly, the owner of the Dajiang daily newspaper, this yard ostensibly served as the newspaper's office, but was, in reality, the strategic headquarters for planning armed rebellion. The primary staff seemingly working at the newspaper were, in fact, secretly developed Revolutionary Alliance members. After the compound's completion, it initially lacked an official name. Sun Wu, sensing the need for discretion, solicited suggestions. A young journalist and newly joined Alliance member proposed Hidden Spring Garden, explaining its similarity to Beijing's Changchun Yuan, but with added southern refinement, a miniature version distinguishing itself through the subtle change from Chang to Zhang. Sun Wu found the reasoning compelling and immediately adopted the suggestion, simultaneously remembering the young man's name, John Da Tong. After the victory of the Xinhai Revolution, Sun Wu, having lost out in party fighting, supported Yuan Shikai. Following Yuan Shikai and the Northern Warlords' government's collapse, he withdrew from political life and moved to Shanghai, where he died. Hidden Spring Garden was the headquarters of the Dongjiang Province Party during the Kuomintang era. After 1949, both the Central South Regional Party Committee and the Dongjiang Provincial Party Committee used this location as their office. By the mid-1950s, when the Provincial Committee compound expanded and constructed numerous office buildings, Hidden Spring Garden was divided into two parts. One section was allocated to the Provincial Committee's children's school. At the same time, the other became a small guest house, nicknamed Little Guest, for party leaders and their families temporarily transferred from Beijing or other regions without permanent housing. Initially located within the same compound, a wall was later erected to separate Little Guest from the main Provincial Committee compound, transforming it into a standalone courtyard. Chen Yiming had recently been transferred and, being alone and not yet assigned permanent housing, was temporarily residing in Little Guest. The compound contained 3 villa-style small buildings, all wood-structured with a blend of Chinese and Western architectural elements. Chen lived in Building Number 2, a 2-story structure with 7 or 8 rooms of various sizes. Having more space than he needed, he primarily occupied the first floor and rarely visited the second. In truth, Hidden Spring Garden was not unfamiliar to Chen Yiming. During the 1950s, while in elementary school, he had visited once during a summer holiday when his father, working at the General Staff Headquarters, was inspecting the Dongjiang military region. He had listened to his father's stories about liberating Dajiang and was eager to accompany him. This was Chen Yiming's first trip to Dongjiang. His second visit came during the Cultural Revolution when he traveled with classmates to Chairman Mao's hometown of Yueshan, briefly passing through Dajiang without leaving much impression. The first visit with his father remains the most vivid part of his memory. During that trip, just before his father returned to Beijing after completing his unit inspection, his father mentioned a comrade who had invited them to visit. Mysteriously, he asked Chen if he knew who this comrade was. When Chen asked who, his father spoke of the Uncle Gu he often mentioned, a political commissar who, alongside him and General Hong Hu, had liberated Dajiang. While his father and General Hong Hu frequently met in Beijing, Uncle Gu worked elsewhere, making their meetings rare. Chen Yiming, expecting a towering, heroic figure like his father described, was surprised to find that Uncle Gu was surprisingly short, barely over 5 feet tall. Disappointed, he became somewhat dismissive, barely engaging when Uncle Gu affectionately patted his head and asked questions.
Instead, he wandered into the garden, which was filled with massive trees and resonant with cicada songs. His favorite summer pastime of catching cicadas completely consumed his attention. Chen Yiming never imagined he would one day become this short uncle's secretary. When he first reported for duty and reflexively called him uncle, the man's face remained stern, seriously instructing, "Address me as leader." From that moment forward, he always referred to Uncle Gu as leader, and he never changed. He remembered that the leader had lived in building number 1, separated from his current residence in building number 2 by a rust-covered iron trellis overgrown with green vines. The buildings were so close that one could almost reach the neighboring buildings' windows. Sometimes, standing alone in his small courtyard and gazing at the lights in building number 1, he would be transported back to that childhood memory, feeling a sudden sense of nostalgia and wonder. 6. The love of the provincial party secretary. Suddenly, a series of memories began to flash through his mind. The narrow gate between Hidden Spring Garden and the provincial committee compound could only allow people and bicycles to pass, so the car stopped at the entrance. He got out, waited for the driver to leave, and then turned towards building number 2, replaying in his mind his visit to South Lake Road Special Number 1 to see Song Qian-kun. He was so focused that he didn't notice the garden gate of building number 2 had been opened. Upon entering the small courtyard, he realized the door was wide open. He paused, initially thinking he had forgotten to close it in the morning. But then he noticed a glimmer of light through the doorway, suggesting someone was inside. He recalled that the toilet at home had been broken, and he had asked his secretary Hu Xiangyang to arrange for repairs. Perhaps the maintenance staff from the logistics department had come with a key. As he walked towards the house, the rhythmic sound of high heels approached, and an elegant, tall woman glided out like she was walking on a runway. Chen Yiming was startled when he recognized her. It was his wife, Xiao Xiao. Chen Yiming stared at his wife, who seemed to have descended from the sky, momentarily stunned. It wasn't until she laughed teasingly and said, "Didn't expect me to parachute into Dongjiang, did you? Provincial party secretary," that he fully realized. How did you get here?" he stammered. "This is my home. Why can't I come?" Xiao Xiao retorted playfully. "You're always talking about living alone in a small building. Isn't it a waste if I don't come and keep you company?" She glanced around the room. "Thank goodness I came. This nice house was so dirty it looked like a dog's kennel. I've been cleaning all day to make it presentable." Chen Yiming noticed the previously messy room was now meticulously organized. A fresh bouquet of roses sat on the TV cabinet, and a subtle fragrance filled the air, creating a warm family atmosphere. However, he still furrowed his brow slightly. "You should have given me a heads up first, so I could send a car to pick you up." His tone carried a clear reproach, but Xiao Xiao seemed not to notice or care. She gave him a sidelong glance. "I wouldn't dare trouble you. I'm afraid you'd just complain that I'm interfering with your work. Besides, would you have even let me come if I had called ahead?" This question caught Chen Yiming off guard. Indeed, since taking his post in Dongjiang, he had deliberately kept his family away to avoid distractions and focus on establishing himself quickly. But seeing his wife appear suddenly like a divine messenger left him bewildered. Looking at her triumphant expression, he asked seriously, "You really came specifically for this?" Xiao Xiao glanced at him, maintaining her playful tone. "Of course not. Who would dare to barge into your territory uninvited?" Chen Yiming said, "So you're here for something else." Now Xiao Xiao spoke seriously. "I'm here as a specially invited guest for the Popular Arts Media Group's stock listing celebration. And I'm also visiting to see my husband." She gave him a meaningful look. "Is this answer satisfactory?" "I was thinking of bringing cola, too," she continued enthusiastically. "Ever since you transferred to Dongjiang, he's been begging to come and play. But he's in middle school preparing for exams, so I didn't—" Chen Yiming interrupted. "Did you have a connection with the Popular Arts Group before? Why would they suddenly invite you as a special guest?" At Chen Yiming's question, Xiao Xiao's previously smiling face suddenly stiffened.
What do you mean by that? Are you suggesting they invited me because of you?
I didn't mean, Chen Yiming stammered. If you didn't mean that, then what did you mean? Are you implying that my status as a singer is also because of your influence? This barrage of questions made Chen Yiming realize Xiao Xiao was truly angry. He felt his earlier words were inappropriate. They had been separated for so long, and his wife had traveled far to see him. Regardless of the circumstances, this was a joyous occasion. He shouldn't have dampened her spirits immediately upon meeting. Thinking this, he temporarily set aside his doubts and spoke conciliatorily.
Okay, I was wrong. Esteemed singer, I formally apologize.
He glanced at his watch.
Oh, it's so late. We should eat. Let's go out to a restaurant. My treat.
Hearing this, Xiao Xiao's expression softened. She gave him a reproachful look. No need to spend money. I've already prepared dinner. I packed some dishes from the hotel where I was meeting before coming. All your favorites. She picked up a bulging plastic bag from the TV cabinet. They've gotten cold. I'll warm them up in the microwave. Just watch some TV. I'll be right back. As she walked to the kitchen, Chen Yiming sat on the sofa, his mind drifting. He heard his wife operating the microwave, talking about the event. I had no previous connection with popular arts media group. This celebration was quite well organized. The venue, Phoenix Island, was breathtakingly beautiful, like a fairyland. I could hardly bear to leave. I didn't know Dongjiang had such beautiful places. I must bring Cola to visit next time. The service for guests was impeccable. Their chairman, Du Wei, even personally drove me to Hidden Spring Garden. The event was quite large-scale, with the provincial governor and propaganda minister in attendance. I thought you would also attend. Xiao Xiao's voice seemed to come from a distant place, almost from another time and space. Chen Yiming felt his thoughts float like goose feathers, drifting towards the past. Chen Yiming first met Xiao Xiao in C County. At the time, he had just been assigned to work there. With long-distance separation and busy work, most family responsibilities, especially their daughter Yi Man's education, fell on his wife, Cui Manli. Cui Manli's parents were both university professors. After returning from the northern wilderness, she worked at the Municipal Housing Management Bureau's heating company and later transferred to university work. Though she worked in accounting, influenced by the academic environment and her regret of not attending university due to her rural, sent-down experience, she was extremely focused on her daughter's education. Yi Man was born in the northern wilderness. At that time, Chen Yiming had already been recommended to study at Beijing University. Cui Manli had endured much hardship for her daughter. When the mother and daughter returned to Beijing with the army of educated youth returning to the city, their daughter was already 2 years old. Chen Yiming had graduated from Peking University and was assigned to work in the central government. When their daughter first met him, she refused to call him Dad. So, he always felt he owed them both. But after a short time together, he was assigned to C County. Cui Manli was furious, believing he was selfish and completely neglecting his family and child for his career. Every time Chen Yiming returned to Beijing, they would argue endlessly. She pressured him to return to Beijing quickly, even threatening divorce. Once, Chen Yiming, frustrated, told Cui Manli, "Let's divorce then, to save us both this suffering." Both were stubborn and unwilling to compromise on something they believed in. This shared characteristic had initially brought them together, with plans to settle permanently in the northern wilderness. Now, this same characteristic led them to abruptly file for divorce at the Civil Affairs Bureau, both hiding this from their daughter and parents. Shortly after, Cui Manli's father, who was a senior visiting scholar at York University, helped her find a high school and resign from her accounting job. She then went to England with her daughter. It was during this period that Chen Yiming met Xiao Xiao. At the time, she was a vocal student at the Central Conservatory of Music, having won a bronze prize in a CCTV singing competition and gained some fame in the music world. She was part of an art troupe organized by the China Federation of Literary and Art Circles, performing in revolutionary bass areas. C County was the birthplace of the famous song "Without the Communist Party, There Would Be No New China." The art troupe made it their first performance stop. During the performance, Xiao Xiao's solo rendition of Hometown Folks received thunderous applause. The song used a Shandong Yimeng folk melody, with each note revealing deep hometown sentiment. Chen Yiming was also born in the Yimeng Mountains of Shandong. At that time, his father was commanding troops after completing a blocking mission against Du Yuming's forces, ultimately annihilating Zhang Lingfu's 74th Consolidated Brigade. Chen Yiming was born during this period. His father was so overjoyed that he immediately named his son Yimeng. Hometown Folks wasn't Xiao Xiao's original song, but her crystal-clear, spring-like voice, passionate performance, and pure, beautiful appearance deeply moved Chen Yimeng. It awakened in him a near-blood-related emotional connection to the people of the old revolutionary base areas. At the celebration banquet hosted by the C County government after the performance, Chen Yimeng deliberately approached Xiao Xiao to toast her. Like an enthusiastic fan, he pulled out a small notebook and asked for her autograph. Perhaps because she was new to such attention or because of Chen Yimeng's position as a county magistrate, Xiao Xiao seemed slightly embarrassed, her makeup-free face resembling a lotus emerging from the water with a hint of shyness. While signing, Chen Yiming said, "I detected a strong Shandong flavor in your performance." After signing it, she returned the notebook and said, "My family is from Linyi, Shandong." Chen Yimeng responded, "I was born in Yimeng, Shandong. I'm also a local. We're hometown folks." They felt an immediate sense of closeness. Before returning to his seat, Chen Yimeng asked for Xiao Xiao's contact information and address. The next day, the art troupe left C County. However, Xiao Xiao's impression didn't fade with their departure. Her heavenly voice was like a clear spring moistening his heart, which had become parched and desolate after his divorce. Half a year later, during a vacation in Beijing, he used the address in his notebook to find her at the Central Conservatory of Music. They fell in love. Unlike his previous relationship with Sui Manli, which was primarily based on shared circumstances, his relationship with Xiao Xiao was driven purely by mutual spiritual and physical attraction. For Chen Yimeng, this was an entirely new kind of love. Like hydrogen, once ignited, it burned rapidly. Soon they were discussing marriage. At the time, Xiao Xiao was about to graduate from the Central Conservatory of Music. She had been a sponsored student from the Linyi Song and Dance Troupe, contractually obligated to return after graduation. But having already made a name for herself in the music world, she hoped to develop her career in Beijing and asked Chen Yimeng about staying in the capital. Though her request was reasonable, his fiancée, Chen Yimeng, felt conflicted. Despite his connections from previously working as a secretary, he hesitated to use his influence to secure her a position. He remembered how the leader he worked for deeply despised using power for personal gain. Finally, he sought help from Hong Tai-hung, though their relationship had grown distant since Chen's assignment to C County. Hong Tai-hung rarely stayed in Beijing, mostly living in a large house near the Mion Reservoir. Chen Yimeng drove over 2 hours to meet him. After hearing about Xiao Xiao's situation, Hong Tai-hung immediately and cheerfully agreed. "No problem. Consider it done. What are big brothers for?" Sitting in his wheelchair, he slapped his chest confidently, then gave Chen Yimeng a sideways glance. "But there's something that puzzles me. You've been married twice now, and Yan Bei is still single. Don't you care about her at all?" Chen Yimeng was caught off guard by this comment. Yan Bei, Hong Tai-hung's sister, had quietly harbored feelings for him. Chen had always seen her as a younger sister, never experiencing romantic feelings. He realized he should have found an opportunity to explain this to her or to Hong Tai-hung. Fortunately, Hong Tai-hung didn't dwell on the matter. Laughing heartily, he said magnanimously, "I was just saying something casual. Don't take it to heart. I'm disillusioned with politics, but you have great aspirations. You might become a political leader, so don't worry about small matters. But remember, if I ever need help in the future, you can't turn your back on me." Chen Yimeng felt there was a deeper meaning behind Hong Tai-hung's jovial words. More than a decade passed. Xiao Xiao was now a renowned soprano and had given birth to their son, Kola. Throughout this time, Chen Yiming continued to work far from Beijing, occasionally returning briefly for meetings. Xiao Xiao would often use her nationwide performance tours as opportunities to visit him, sometimes bringing Kola. Their family moved around like gypsies, following Chen Yiming's work assignments. This prolonged pattern of separation frustrated Xiao Xiao. A few years earlier, when Chen was appointed governor of B province, she proposed moving there with Kola, but he refused. It wasn't that he didn't want family unity, but he was concerned about her potentially becoming entangled in local power networks and creating complications for his work. His concerns were not unfounded. Numerous cases existed of leadership cadres compromised by their family members' involvement in corruption. His predecessor had fallen precisely because of such circumstances. Moreover, as a famous singer, Xiao Xiao would be particularly vulnerable to being co-opted by interest groups. As with every previous job assignment, he had come to Dongjiang alone, carrying only a travel bag. After discussing matters with the organization department leadership and visiting the leader, he returned home briefly. Unfortunately, Xiao Xiao was performing out of town. He had no choice but to pick up his son from the boarding school, share a meal at a nearby Peking duck restaurant, and leave the next day. This had happened 6 months ago. Since then, Chen Yiming and his wife hadn't seen each other. Today's unexpected meeting delighted him, but he also felt strangely coincidental, almost like a novel with a plot too perfectly constructed to seem real. Shortly, Xiao Xiao brought out the heated meals from the kitchen. Watching his wife wearing an apron, looking like an efficient housewife, Chen Yiming's underlying suspicions gradually dissolved. The dishes from the hotel's takeout box emanated an enticing aroma. Remembering a bottle of red wine at home, he retrieved it and 2 rarely used stemmed glasses, pouring wine for himself and Xiao Xiao. They exchanged smiles, touched glasses, and felt a long-missed family atmosphere envelop them. Xiao Xiao served a piece of fish into Chen Yiming's bowl. "This dish is called Phoenix fish belly," she explained. "They say it's only found in Yangzhou Lake near Phoenix Island. It was a tribute to the Empress Dowager during the Qing dynasty. At the event, all the special guests found it incredibly delicious. You've been in Dongjiang for almost half a year. You must have tried it already, right?" Chen Yiming had heard of the sesh, but had never eaten it. He curiously took a bite. It's indeed delicious." To create an atmosphere, he turned on the television. He usually ate in the staff canteen, which was more of a sleeping quarter than a home. He rarely turned on the TV. When he did, it was only for central or local news broadcasts. As he switched on the TV this time, he recalled his visit to Songqiankun earlier that day and tuned to the Dongjiang channel. The local news had just begun, and the first segment was about his visit to Songqiankun. Today, Provincial Party Secretary Chen Yiming warmly visited provincial veteran leaders, including Songqiankun. Chen Yiming and his delegation extended warm greetings to the veteran comrades, emphasizing that old comrades are a precious treasure of our party. All levels of leadership must prioritize veteran cadre work, listen to their voices, and resolve their difficulties. The next news segment was about the popular arts media group's stock listing celebration. Its prominence was clearly due to Provincial Governor Luo Baocheng and Provincial Propaganda Department head Lang Tao attending the event. The camera gave Luo Baocheng a close-up shot, his ruddy face almost filling the entire screen, looking nothing like someone supposedly in the hospital. Xiao Xiao's image also flashed briefly on the screen, which pleased her. Popular Arts brought in many celebrities for this celebration. "Do you know who was there?" she asked. Chen Yiming's gaze remained fixed on the screen, seemingly not hearing her. So Xiao Xiao answered herself. "The writer Song Xiaofen was there. She's your idol." "I've just read her works. I wouldn't call it idol worship," Chen Yiming replied absently, shifting his attention from the screen. He thought his wife's tendency to exaggerate probably stemmed from her performing career. "I told Song Xiaofan that you really like her utopia," Xiao Xiao continued enthusiastically. "She was delighted and said she would definitely visit you sometime. By the way, she's a local of Dongjiang. Her father is a veteran provincial leader. The news about you visiting veteran cadres, that old leader was also surnamed Song. Could he be Song Xiaofan's father? Chen Yiming mumbled non-committally, deflecting the question. Xiao Xiao seemed to remember something else. I also met someone at the celebration. Chen Yiming, only half listening, asked casually, Who? Someone you know, Xiao Xiao said mysteriously. Guess who? Chen Yiming, uninterested in playing her guessing game, turned his attention back to the television. The local news had ended and a weather forecast was playing. Hong Yanbei, Xiao Xiao said, looking directly at her husband, enunciating each syllable carefully. Chen Yiming heard these 3 words, and his body slightly trembled. His gaze jerked away from the television as if burned. Hong Yanbei. What's she doing here? He muttered. Is she famous now? Xiao Xiao knew about the history between Chen Yiming and Hong Yanbei. She watched him intently, her expression complex. She's not a celebrity, but for Popular Arts Media Group, she's more important than a celebrity. Chen Yiming put down his chopsticks in the middle of eating and drinking. What do you mean? Hong Yanbei is representing her brother Hong Taihang at the celebration, Xiao Xiao said. Hong Taihang is an important shareholder of Popular Arts Media Group. Do you understand now? Chen Yiming furrowed his brow tightly, seeming to understand something yet completely confused. Song Xiaofan also told me that the Hong siblings are her cousins, Xiao Xiao continued, her tone a mix of seriousness and playfulness. She wants to invite me and Hong Yanbei to her home. What do you think? Should I go? She paused. Hong Yanbei might be staying in Dajiang for a while. Don't you want to meet her? Chen Yiming felt that his wife's voice sounded somehow ambiguous, as if coming from a far-off place.